Dostcast to the moon! Dostcast to the moon! Dostcast to the moon! Subscribe to Dostcast! Yo, what is up my friends? Welcome to another episode of Dostcast. मेरा नाम है Vinamre Kasana. If you are new to our YouTube channel, please subscribe because we release new episodes every Tuesday and Friday at 12 p.m. Indian Standard Time. और अगर आप इस पॉडकास्ट को किसी ऑडियो प्लेटफॉर्म पे सुन रहे हो, make sure you give us 5 stars because we're the best in भारत वर्ष baby. Having said that, आज के हमारे गेस्ट का नाम है योहान टेंगरा. He runs Anarchy For Freedom India. ये भाई गवर्नमेंट्स को टॉपल नहीं करना चाहता. He's a special kind of anarchist. One of the most articulate people I've come across in my duration in Mumbai and in India. Yohan has been responsible for directly helping file several PILs in Indian courts, जिसकी वजह से वैक्सीन मैंडेट्स अब लोग चैलेंज कर सकते हैं. We talk a bunch about world governments, deep states, great reset. आप में से जितने भी लोग हैं जो conspiracy theory का brain रखते हैं, all of you skeptical thinkers who want to see what the world is about, listen to it from the man himself. We also discussed vaccinations, Bill Gates, Illuminati, सारे clickbait A1 title जिसको देख के आप बोलते हो भाई मुझे लगता है ये जो हमारे जो नेता है ना ये रेप्टाइल हैं. ये वाली जो बातें होती ना आदमी जो मतलब सोचता है यार कि भाई ज़्यादा स्मैक वैक मार लिया, ऐसी वाली बातें भी करते हैं आज हम. एंड वी एक्चुअली पुट इट थ्रू अ लाई डिटेक्टर टू सी कि ये बातें सच हैं या नहीं है. आई वोंट से इट फर्दर बिकॉज यूर ऑलरेडी लाइक व्हाट द फक इज हैपनिंग. सो जस्ट वॉच द एपिसोड. The episode with the incredibly articulate Yohan Tengra begins in 3, 2, 1. What's up, Yohan Tengra on Dostcast. Before हम कोई और बात भी करें bro, we just popped 7 pills of Qualia. Unless you were thinking हम कुछ और कर रहे हैं. But I discovered Qualia when I was in the US and I've tried Alpha GPC as well. ये Nootropic का जो पूरा culture है ना, I had friends who just mixed their own nootropics and they had pill dispensers and whatnot. But I figured कि not every nootropic works on everyone. You have to kind of do your research. You've got a Qualia, which is क्या होगा क्या? Is it like an all-encompassing smart drug?
It has like a couple of B vitamins, coffee berry, lion's mane. So typical nutrients that are known for enhancing the brain, like in different ways. So there are different variants as well. Like I've tried a couple of them. There's a Qualia Focus. That's the one I take where I'm typically sitting down to read something I really want to absorb badly. And then this Mind one is, it helps me a lot when I'm going out and, giving a speech or doing a podcast or something, because it helps you get in your flow state, and all your kind of, it's crazy because even the stuff I've read like 3-4 years back, everything just comes together and it kind of flows. So this is the kind one I've settled on after a lot of trial and error that way. But it works for me. We'll see if it works for you or not.
Yeah, I can already feel something gushing through my body. I was watching the Huberman Lab podcast and he recommended that, if you take if you take 3 or 4 omega-3 capsules with EPA, उसके अंदर if you cross 1,000 milligrams of EPA, that's the equivalent of taking like an antidepressant dose. It's just as effective.
Yeah, omega-3s are very critical for brain health. In fact, that's the reason why they recommend folate and omega-3 so much for pregnant ladies as well, because it does help in brain development quite a bit.
You live in Mumbai, the heart of the vada pav, the land of the vada pav. Okay? Yeah. How difficult is it to be you and do all the things you do, all the dietary things? I know you share a bunch of Paul Salad, stuff on Instagram as well, and convince others around you, okay, bro, zindagi vada pav se badi hai. And like there are genuine merits to biohacking and optimizing your diet for peak performance.
See, I have many niches when it comes to the subjects I cover. So biohacking, nutrition science is one of them. In fact, it's become one of the main ones because earlier on I was kind of more, you can say, into conspiracy research and going through a lot of different kinds of material about what's really going on in different sectors of life. But once my dad kind of stuck up with an autoimmune condition, in order to help him as well as in order to help myself, like earlier I struggled with a lot of acne and skin issues and stuff. So just to help myself as well as to like help my family, I went deep into nutrition science. So I just started out with a vegan. Like I used to be a vegan 5 years back, which is totally different from what I'm doing right now. In fact, I've developed many I wouldn't necessarily say anti-vegan because I'm all for personal choice. Like
right.
Whatever works for people, if it works for them, then good for you. But I've realized that veganism is being pushed in a certain way because there's a lot of big money involved and a lot of vested interest. Because maybe we come to that later. But that's how I started my diet journey. And after that, I was so frustrated because veganism was supposed to be the best thing in the world and it was supposed to cure all my health issues and I mean, there's a whole environmental appeal and emotional appeal as well about animal rights and how you're saving the planet and how you're saving so much water and all of that. So I fell for all of that. And then, I mean, it was a learning curve. I always tell people, and people always ask, some people ask me, because I've been doing this kind of stuff since 7 years now. It's been 7 years since I started my conscious awakening journey and consciously taking content in that was different from whatever the mainstream is trying to feed us. So some people always ask me, like, you were wrong about that. So why should I listen to you now? But I'm like, that's the very nature of knowledge. That's the very nature of learning curves. Like you put your mind to something and you start there, and then eventually it's gonna change. That's the nature of wisdom, man. And there's so much knowledge in the universe that we're probably just tapping into less than 1% right now.
Right.
So I started out there, and then eventually by the end of my vegan experiment I got so frustrated because I was like, dude, they're telling me so much but nothing's happening. It's like a honeymoon period for the first 3 months because you're getting off. There's so many confounding variables. When you're going vegan, you're probably getting into meditation at the same time. You're probably leaving alcohol. You're getting so conscious about
it's a
your
lifestyle.
Life. Yeah, man. Like you're leaving a lot of other stuff out as well, which is harmful. Like you're cutting out processed foods, you're cutting out seed oils, and then all the credit goes to the meat. Like it's the meat. The meat is the villain kind of. Which doesn't make any sense actually when you compare. I mean, they've done studies where they've compared conscious vegans to conscious omnivores, like people who eat a clean, animal based diet, and there's no really differences statistically if you see that. So I mean, that all of that was coming up. I wasn't seeing the results, and at the same time I was, my cognitive dissonance was going down, because when you've totally got absorbed into something and you make it your identity, then you kind of ward off other information, that doesn't fit that.
Right.
But because I got kind of conducive through my own experience, I started listening to people who were talking about paleo, keto, and I was like, I mean, I don't know if I can curse or not, but fuck,
curse?
There's so much information on this from so many different sides. People are making so many contradictory claims. I don't know what to believe anymore.
Yeah.
So I just stopped it. I was like, I'm gonna go back and not go back in a sense कि सब जैसे life था पहले कचरा खाओ, fast food खाओ, but just try to eat clean and whole. Like whether it's plant or animal, just do that basic. So I started there, and then I actually started taking it. I was like, no, if I put my mind to this, I can actually get to the bottom of the truth. Because I do believe, I'm not a solipsist, like someone who just believes that everything's relative and your opinion is the same as mine. I believe that's absolute garbage. There is truth out there to be found in every area.
That community is called the fake deep community.
There is truth out there to be found in every area, and it depends on how much proof of work you put in. Like you have to put the time and effort in to actually take the knowledge in from different sides and then apply a logic to come to that. So I started my conscious nutrition journey at that time, and then my dad's case came up. He suddenly hit up an autoimmune disorder. It's called myasthenia gravis. So in that, the immune systems are attacking your receptors, like your muscle receptors. So it starts with the eyes. Your eyelids start drooping randomly. You lose conscious control over them. And if it gets worse, like if the immune attack gets worse...
Is that what happened to Justin Bieber?
No, that's a different kind of disease. It's a Ramsay hunt. This is myasthenia gravis. So I'll maybe we talk about Justin Bieber when we come to vaccines, if we do come to them.
Okay.
But
we will.
Okay, good man. I'm looking forward to it. But
दोस्तों हम आज बैठे हैं मशहूर anti-vaxxer. Oops, I'm just kidding. Vaccine skeptic Yohan Tengra के साथ. Anyway.
Yeah, I have a lot to say about that. We come to that later.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, so myasthenia gravis, right? So it starts with the eyelids, and then if it gets worse, it can progress to your arms and your legs as well. So you lose control over them. And then I had seen my grandmom also struggle, and I'm not really against the allopathic system broadly. Like I'm not going to come here and bash allopathy or something. Like it has use cases. There's a time and place for antibiotics. There's a time and place for surgery. All of that. But it shouldn't be like the routine day-to-day thing you do, right? For health prevention.
Pill popping करते हैं.
Exactly, and it gets you on a roller coaster constantly because of the side effect profile. I mean, it does work for whatever they give you, but it's just symptom management. So I took all of that and I got scared because I've always wanted control of my life in every area, and it made me very nervous 30-40 years down the line, because I'm living unconsciously and I haven't delved deep and I don't know how to control my own biology. Like I could land up like my grandmama, I could land up with my dad. So then I really got interested, and then I just started consuming a lot of podcasts, and I was like, initially it's intimidating because you don't really understand the subject and you haven't taken a degree in that. But then the more you keep learning, the more podcasts you watch, the more papers you read, it kind of grows on you and you understand more and more and your clarity gets better. So that was my journey 5 years back in the diet space. Started out with veganism, figured out it's misleading people in many ways. Then stumbled upon paleo, just did paleo for a while. Then I did ketosis, and ketosis was a big breakthrough for me. because the kind of mental benefits it gave me, as well as in terms of satiety and how you don't feel hungry, you just forget about meals, dude. Like when I was doing ketosis, I was so focused on my work and my brain was buzzing so much. I mean, it's similar to taking a nootropic, like how I'm feeling right now when I'm talking. It's just like that in ketosis, because everything just comes back and you're in a big flow state constantly. So I mean, if anyone's never tried ketosis, I would really recommend it. Even as an experiment, I don't promote long-term continuous chronic ketosis. It can mess up your hormones, and there's a downside to anything if you just do it continuously. Like even ancestrally speaking, your ancestors wouldn't have done fasting or something continuously. It was kind of a feast and famine thing where they would fast for a while and then they would get their hunt.
Snacking का scene तो बिल्कुल नहीं था ना?
Not for me necessarily. I used to do it before.
I mean for our ancestors, like snacking isn't a thing they did.
Yeah, because they had to wait for every animal they would get to hunt, and agriculture came on much later, like just 10,000 years, right? So before that, I mean, it was a hunter-gatherer kind of scene, and they wouldn't be engaging in just eating constantly throughout the day. And it's in fact after mainstream agriculture started that many researchers speculate that the brain size shrunk, and then people started getting all kinds of chronic disease development, especially after we started agriculture in the way we did 10,000 years back. So grains also have a lot of downstream effects. Like people don't realize plants are conscious as well, and the seeds, the grains that we're growing are the babies of the plants. So there are a lot of anti-nutrients inside them. If people haven't heard of anti-nutrients like lectins, oxalates, phytic acid, there's a lot of stuff in there that can have medicinal properties. So I'm not like bashing all anti-nutrients as they're all evil and they're just going to damage your gut or whatever when you take them. There are a lot of, you can say, polyphenols, flavonoids in plants that are medicinally studied. A lot of drugs are developed based on them. So they do have efficacy, but I mean, just generally taking food in, our ancestors did realize that you had to prepare it carefully. You'd have to soak, you'd have to sprout. So they did take those efforts to, remove the seeds and peel the coating of the tomato plant, for example, in Italy, or if you're talking about quinoa in Central America, like they would take great steps to make sure the grains were prepared properly, which is not something we do today, which is why I think it's added to the rise in chronic diseases we're seeing today, along with many other factors. But yeah, that's basically what got me into biohacking. And you asked me this question about the culture.
Right.
So when I was starting out with this, like,
can I just stop you right there? I recently came across this through multiple sources. Paul Saladino ek ho gaya, and then there are other guys who started saying that plants ke andar there's they have defensive mechanisms. This wasn't the case like a few years ago, right? We didn't have that information, but suddenly बहुत सारी carnivore community, meat community started to rally around it. And I'm just wondering, is it when we eat a lot of plants, is it the bitter taste that signifies that?
It's not just the bitter taste, man. Like, I mean, if you even take other plants that aren't bitter at all, like maybe take spinach for example. Like spinach isn't bitter per se, but you have a lot of oxalate content.
Cowboy propaganda.
yeah. You have a lot of oxalate in there, and I mean, you can find case controls and studies where you can see that people have developed kidney stones after going on smoothie crazes. Like this whole culture in the West where they just want to like juice everything and continuously keep having spinach smoothies and all that. They'll end up with kidney stones, man. A lot of them. I mean, and then see, it's not like there's an attack vector and there's a defense vector, right? So I mean, there's the whole craze also right now in the carnivore community where all anti-nutrients are demonized. Like you can't even eat one of them, otherwise it's going to do this to you. And it doesn't really work like that. Like, cause if you just take oxalates, for example, okay, so the oxalates that come from spinach, it's just one type of anti-nutrient. They're tiny glass-like crystals that can go inside the body if you don't have the bacteria in your gut to digest it. So there's a bacteria called oxalobacter that breaks down the oxalate that you're getting from the spinach. If you don't have that, let's talk about the variables. Maybe you've taken a round of antibiotics. That's wiped out your good gut flora. And then you start taking like a oxalate heavy diet. It's going to be more problematic for you than before because you probably had the bacteria to digest it. So there are many defense vectors as well. Like we have mechanisms to detoxify these things in the body. It's not like or like we're going to die or something like that. But the reason it's become so problematic right now is because our defenses have been lowered because of all the epigenetic assaults that have been put on us, that are weakening our terrain, so to speak, like our host factors. There are many, man, like the rise in seed oils, the rise in EMF consumption.
EMF क्या होता है?
Electromagnetic fields, low frequency. There's a lot of,
I know what PEMF is. PEMF therapy होती है ना?
Yeah, that's a good thing, and there are various effects on that on the nervous system and stuff. Like people use it for mental disorders and things like that. And that does have efficacy, but I'm talking about the negative side of that, which is Wi-Fi, cell phone, Bluetooth. And again, I mean, this is going to trigger a lot of people to think that typical responses when you talk about this stuff, like, oh, this frequency doesn't have enough energy to even knock off an electron. How is it going to cause damage? But there are researchers who've put work into studying alternate mechanisms of how it's causing damage. Like you can look into the work of Martin Paul. He's written many papers on how EMFs actually affect the VGCGs inside our cells, the voltage-gated calcium channels.
Sorry, what?
Yeah, so I mean, this is what I do for a living. I work at Thrive, so I'm deeply steeped in a lot of, you can say, technical jargons around.
But I would love to know, what did you just say?
It's a voltage-gated calcium channel. These are like channels, I mean, in every cell of our body, you have various types of receptors and channels and stuff.
इसे बोलते हैं calcification हो रही है आपकी किसी gland.
It controls the movement of calcium inside and outside the cell. So what happens is when you're exposed to a lot of EMF, like this calcium floods into the cell, and then there's a reaction that happens with nitric oxide, which creates this very, very dangerous oxidizing agent called peroxynitrite. And that's actually what causes the damage. So it's a totally different mechanism. Like people are thinking about ionizing radiation like X-rays or UV rays and stuff, and they think, okay, theek hai, chalo, like if it's subjected to you, then it can knock an electron off.
Sunscreen लगा लेते UV rays से prevention से, which is like downright stupid. I saw a video of the Daily Stoic guy Ryan Holiday. उसने क्या करा अपने pickup truck के पीछे he just squirted out a bunch of sunscreen on the back of it and he couldn't get it off. It's like ये लगाते हो अपने skin के ऊपर. I saw that video. I was like, I'm never putting in sunscreen again.
Yeah, I mean, even about the sun, we've been so demonized just to be so afraid of the sun, but there's so many benefits the sun offers. I mean, the thing is, people go crazy on both sides, So I just was
there's also like the sun your balls community.
Yeah,
and
like that.
I would love to do it here, but it's just like if you sun your balls here,
culture देखना पड़ता है.
Culture देखना पड़ता है. But यही तो मैं पूछ रहा हूँ, like even like just having these conversations and even studying it. यहाँ पे how much of your research around better health have you had to optimize for India? एक तो ये चीज़ I noticed that on your YouTube channel specifically a majority of your content is in Hindi.
Yeah.
ताकि लोग समझ पाएं. And then I have to commend you, bro. You're a wonderful speaker. You've spoken at the Rajiv Dikshit memorial thingy and you've spoken at the Azad Maidan as well. वहाँ पे speeches चल रही हैं हिंदी में full power. कितना मुश्किल है ये इंडिया के लिए optimize करना है सारी चीज़ें?
It's been pioneering work, man, if you ask me, because there's been no cultural presence. So my foray into this, my entry into this was through studying spirituality research. So I got into this after reading a lot of mystics and, near-death experience research, past life regression research, things like that. That's
past life regression, I've done a workshop. I'm not sure if it's
legit or not.
Yeah, I've done it myself, but I'm just wondering कि वो hypnosis से हुआ था.
Yeah, it was your own brain creating those memories or whatever. But I mean, whatever you take it as, I mean, through my study into spirituality, I do believe that reincarnation is real and we have a lot of evidence for that. And there are, it's not just esoteric sources and gurus and stuff, but there are a lot of hard scientific researchers also trying to do this in a randomized way in hospital settings where, I mean, there's good scientific literature also available on what happens in NDEs. Like when people have a near-death experience research and, a lot of scientists have tried to apply. I mean, same thing for psychics and mediums as well. Like a lot of the skeptical explanations for them, okay, they're doing a cold reading and, they're trying to project general things onto that would apply to
Barnum statements बोलते हैं. I had the magician, psychological illusionist Karan Singh Magic on. That's what he said.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, there are scientists who are doing studies to rule out those explanations. Okay, I mean, there are charlatans and fraud in every area. So if you look into that, even in the scientific community, there's so many charlatans and fraud. You're going to find them when it comes to psychics and mediums and all. But if you stumble across a very legitimate one that's been blessed with the capability or has developed them, it's kind of like a muscle. You have to work on your psychic abilities to enhance them. If you do land up finding a genuine one, like they will, throw arrows at I'll just give you an example. So I had a reading with a psychic once 3 years back and I'm big time into music. She doesn't know anything about me. I've just given her my email and I very well know she doesn't know anything about me. The first thing she saw me, she's like, I can see musical notes in your aura. I was like, man, like how do you pull that one out? Because music's my life, dude. I mean, if you follow my Instagram, you probably know, but I'm deeply kind of I use music a lot as a getaway, as an outlet. Because my work is very heavy. So I do need that kind of release. And I get that with music, right? So and then she told me a lot of stuff that is very bang on. So, I mean, you can't help but think there is something that they're tapping into, they're reading. And it's kind of like a probability thing. They're telling you what's most likely to happen with you, especially when they're giving future predictions based on where your perceptual state is at the moment. Because I feel like just living life as I have, we are magnets and we do draw in experiences based on the kind of perceptual field we're putting out. Whatever we believe, whatever our state of reality is, how we're perceiving the world, we automatically draw in people, information, places that kind of confirms with what you're already going on about. right? So that was my experience with psychics, and I do feel that that's how I started out mainly. That's what I was saying. And coming forward, I did get into a lot of conspiracy research. So I just had this craze of wanting to know what's really going on in the world. So that started with a breakup actually, because I was like, it kind of left me empty. And it's silly to think because it happened in 12th standard, and I'm like looking at relationships and what I know about love and intimacy. It seemed damn stupid at the time, but it's good for me because I was in a very narrow state of mind, and that break was essential for me to kind of open up to higher realities. So I did start out with studying all of that. Then I got into conspiracy research, and the kind of subjects that I've always dabbled into have been very alien, because out here in this land, in this culture especially, people are just absorbed into some of the other religious belief, or then people just flip the other way and go all the way towards scientific materialism.
भाई हम तो atheist है, कुछ भी कर लो.
I mean, so people flip on the other extreme, which I feel is like a dialectic as well. And then you have this new age community like Sadhguru or Shishi Ravi Shankar.
Spiritual but not religious. That's a whole type.
And I have a lot of issues with them as well. So I've never really been able to identify with any dominant group of thinking. That's always
because
been present.
it causes you to cut off your extremities to fit in, और वो problem हो जाती है ना. It's like
there's so many issues with it, man. I mean, if you just see the mindset of those people, because this is what I started out with. I started out with that kind of material and interacting with these kind of people who are into crystals and channeling and Reiki and all this stuff.
तो भाई psychics भी तो वही कर रहे हैं.
वही तो कह रहा हूँ. So that's what I started out with, but coming and sitting where I am now, I do find a lot of issues with their belief system and how they're manipulated, especially to let evil go on in the world. Because people like that, they're totally self-absorbed. They think they don't have an ego, but they have like a very, very inflated ego actually. Many of them, not making blanket statements, honorable exceptions of course. And I mean, they have this mindset where they actively don't want to focus on world events, or they don't want to like watch the news, and they think everything is Maya and illusion. So nothing matters, and you're just supposed to focus on feeling good about yourself and reaching higher states of mental consciousness, and like it's like mental masturbation kind of. That's and I've had deep experience because I've gone to Sadhguru's ashram, I've done a yoga course, I've listened to a lot of these people for many years, and I do find that a lot of these beliefs are weaponized in a way where they literally keep people from looking into the wrongdoing that's going on in the world. Because whenever I've broached, like I got into spirituality first, then I got into conspiracies, and I was figuring out like, okay, this is how we're being manipulated in so many areas. And then when I tried to take this information to that community, it was one of the most resistant to that, because you should not look into the negative. If you look into all this negative stuff and find out what's going on, you're giving your energy there and you're feeding the beast, and these kind of crazy beliefs, whereas spirituality for me has been all about truth discovery. Like you just find out what is going on, and there is objective truth, right? Truth is just that which is. It can't be any other way, man. It's just what has happened and what is happening. There's only one way things are happening, and it's all about figuring that out. And if you find that there are people who are using their power and influence and occult knowledge to manipulate people, it's about taking that and exposing it to the world and showing them like, look, dude, this is how you're being manipulated by a tiny number of people. And if we want to break out of our slavery and our freedoms that are ever vanishing, in the present time, which we'll probably talk about, then you can't do that without understanding the problem first. So that's a big problem with the so-called self-proclaimed spiritual community, because they actively run away from investigating what is going on. They just want to be in their own head and meditate all day, and I find big issues with that as well. So I've never really fit in. Like, coming to your initial question, it's always been a push in any area, because I'm involved in pushing the boundary in so many areas, even with what I was talking to you about with healthcare. Like my dear friend now, she CEO of the company I work at, she started a startup that I work at called Thrive 3 years back, when no one is doing functional medicine in India. Like everything,
root cause medicine, right?
Exactly. So
not symptomatic treatments.
The level of diagnostics that we go into, functional genomic analysis, testing your urine for organic acids, testing your gut bacteria, like no one's doing that stuff out here.
I have a question about gut bacteria specifically. जैसे there are claims, right? अगर आप kefir पियोगे, लस्सी पियोगे, तो आपका gut bacteria better होगा, because it's sort of like a more Indian subcontinental thingy versus आप kombucha पियोगे, right? It's like, have you seen, even anecdotally, for example, what is a good way to like maintain gut bacteria?
It depends. So I mean, just generally speaking, if someone's genetics are fine, like they don't have any predisposition, because there are predispositions and SNPs you can have specifically with respect to certain enzymes that can mess up your gut bacteria. But if you're by and large good over there, I think that just generally maintaining a diet where you're getting probiotics naturally, and the other side to this is not just food, it's also exposure to the environment. Because when you go out on the beach or when you go out in the forest, there's a lot of the native earth microbiome that you get exposed to, especially kids who are playing in the soil and all. They get a lot of their you can say probiotic input from there. So I do feel that environmental exposure is also equally important as much as food. But just for the general population, like avoiding antibiotics and mainly exposing yourself to these sources is a good bet. But the issue is that a lot of guts are getting damaged right now because of various factors. So you can talk about the rise in gluten, like how much wheat people have consumed, and that's totally flipped as well, because there's been this whole you can say gluten awareness thing, and people have gone on like anti-gluten diets or whatever. So of course it's been like a mix there, but there was a time where we were consuming a lot of wheat, and that's played a big role in damaging our gut linings, along with all the alcohol we're consuming. And there's so many things that are damaging our gut, if you just study.
Sorry यार, मैं alcohol lobby से आया हूँ, तो ये नहीं बोल सकता.
Yeah, man. So there's so many environmental factors today that have damaged the gut. So these things that weren't supposed to be harmful to us earlier, like I mean, we were eating wheat say 500 years back also, and that time you didn't have this epidemic of chronic disease or whatever. But it's right now that we've been subjected to so much assault that these kind of attack vectors are triggering us and creating issues in us. So when we do gut microbiota testing, what we find today is many people are struggling with subclinical infections. Like you could have an infection that's not active and dormant, like how if you get a COVID infection. Like I'm gonna get a lot of heat from this because most of my community...
Don't you already?
No, I'm saying from both sides, because half my community believes that viruses aren't real and they're flat earthers and all. So I have a big issue with them, and then I have an issue with people who just deride conspiracy, like कोई conspiracy होती ही नहीं, everything is random, everything is chance. So
ये तो I don't buy it for a second. भाई सब कुछ ही random है. It's like, what, are you gonna use your faculty at all, or just like?
I call them coincidence theorists, because I mean they try to project a coincidence in everything, whereas I mean probably we come to this later, but my point was that again you have these two dialectics in any way, whether you go into that side or this side. So my point is, it's not like an active infection like you get with COVID. A person who's susceptible, who has comorbidities or whatever, if he gets exposure to SARS-CoV-2 for the first time, it's likely that he's going to develop issues, and maybe he might need hospitalization if he doesn't focus on early treatment. We know now, at least after 2 years of the pandemic having started, there's a lot of things we can do to improve our, you can say, outcome when we get exposed to the virus
100%.
eventually. Like you can up your vitamin D levels, you can optimize your selenium levels. There's so many host factors.
Warm liquids to break the virus colony, all of that.
Yeah, I mean, there's zinc lozenges, there's all kind of stuff, that, I mean, I remember getting a COVID infection in Feb of 2020, which was very early on. Okay, and that time...
Pioneer COVID, guys.
Or, I mean, I always knew this because I followed functional medicine people, and they were like, kabhi bhi cold hoga, so you just take this zinc lozenge. Okay, which is like a slow dissolving zinc.
Have you tried hydrogen peroxide in your ear?
Oh, I just, not hydrogen peroxide, nebulization you're talking about, right? That's something Dr. Mercola pushes a lot. So,
it's this thing where hydrogen peroxide ko tum dilute karte ho, because what we get in India is the industrial solution.
That's what I'm talking about.
And you put it in your ears.
Oh, not the ears, but there's the thing that Dr. Mercola came up with, where you like take a small quantity, you put it in a nebulizer, and then you breathe it in.
Okay.
That way.
Okay.
So hydrogen peroxide is actually a free radical, and the reason it works is because it goes in. If you have an active infection, like taking intravenous vitamin C or taking stuff like that, can be very helpful. But you don't want to take it generally,
right?
Because it can cause issues. Like you just don't want hydrogen peroxide coming in, because it can combine with iron to create hydroxyl, which is another dangerous free radical.
Right.
So I mean, people just
don't try this at home.
People get evangelized when they hear something on a podcast, and they're like,
no, I read this on. So I have full disclaimer. I was younger, 9th class mein, and I had an exam and I didn't want to be sick anymore. I haven't had a cold since 9th grade, by the way. Just saying, which is a long time ago. Because what I did is, and USA ke andar, when I was in the US, I found medicinal hydrogen peroxide, which is like not industrial level. वो concentration कम कर देते हैं उसकी. And this is a research that Dr. Richard Simmons did in around 1972, because he realized कि सब लोग ये what typically flus के लिए क्या करते हैं, they are like ये हो गया है, अब इसका full onset होने दो. So this is helpful for like preventing the onset of flu, because he's like the virus actually emerges in your ears. It starts in your ears. So if you can kill it right there and then. bubbling hoti hai kaanon ke andar. It's a very weird esoteric thing. I think I will probably also get a lot of flack for that.
I have read about this.
I've been doing it whenever I feel like I'm about to get sick. Within a night, I'm fixed.
So I have my own hack. Like whenever I'll tell you my recent experience. So I was about to develop a cold, I think 5 months back. And the first day I started getting little bit of symptoms, like little runny nose and all. I started taking my lozenges. So it's just like this slow dissolving form of zinc. You take it, it breaks down in your respiratory tract. So all the viral replication that's happening out here, it stops that. And literally, dude, I did not develop symptoms in a day. It was gone. You know, so it works like magic. And there are many things like that. Like I'll give you papers where they've studied N-acetylcysteine. Okay, that's
sorry, what is that?
NAC. It's a precursor to glutathione. Glutathione is your body's master antioxidant. So people who take that at a dose of like 500, milligrams for 6 months, I think in the intervention group where they were being given that, like they had 80% less incidence of influenza. Maybe numbers are off a little bit, but somewhere like majority, didn't have influenza. Even the people who did, the symptomatic profile, the duration of the influenza, everything was reduced. So my point is this, okay, maybe we dive into vaccines later, but like I'm just giving a contextual framework to how I see vaccines.
Feel free, all the time in the world,
Vaccines are given before an infection comes, so that when the infection comes, your outcome gets better. My point is that why do we see just a needle where we are, kind of immunizing someone with a small subunit of the bacteria or virus or whatever, and that improves the outcomes, when I can cite you so much science on so many different nutraceuticals and lifestyle interventions and stuff that can do the exact same thing.
Right.
So why do we just look at vaccines as the only way with which we can improve disease outcomes? Like, okay, even if it is about stopping transmission, I can give you so much research specifically just concerning COVID on things like povidone iodine, on so many different compounds that actually help reduce the spread as well. Even there's large scale studies on ivermectin as well.
हमारे भाई जो रोगन फंस गए थे उस चक्कर में.
Exactly.
He got a lot of flack for that.
Yeah, but the thing is that there are, effective, credible, scientific-based nutraceutical options available that will achieve the same effect as a vaccine, whether it comes to reducing the spread, whether it comes to reducing disease severity. Like, come on, let's be honest. Like, the vaccines aren't having stopping the spread of the virus. That's a mainstream fact. Even the Supreme Court of our country acknowledged that when giving a judgment. The government could not put up any evidence in the case that my group Awaken India Movement has been involved in, where we won in the Supreme Court for fighting mandates. Right, so even the judge, when he was laying down the order, it's a 110-page order, so they clearly put a lot of thought into putting it in that way, and they were like, the government could not produce any evidence to counter what we were saying, is that there's no difference when it comes to spread between a vaccinated and unvaccinated person, which is something even Bill Gates agrees with, and like a lot of people agree with. The contention comes, okay, vaccines will reduce your risk of hospitalization and severity kam kar denge. I'm like, there's so much other stuff also that will reduce your severity. Right. Why are you just talking like vaccines are the only thing?
I think people want a one-size-fits-all solution too, and they want a dunzo for their bodies. Third, when this entire thing happened, I did not like... So, because I was exposed to the US, I learned about libertarians. मेरे को बढ़िया लगे वो, ठीक है? Not like I would say कि I don't understand these positions or these schools of thought fully, or these ideologies fully to really comment on them. But मैंने एक चीज़ notice करी. When I was there, I experienced a level of personal freedom that when I came back here, I had to sort of mitigate. Say, anywhere from your daily dealings with police to अपनी personal space के अंदर कोई landlord आके तुम्हें harass कर रहा है, to something as simple as जो अब हम ये vaccines or checks, even the Aadhaar, there's a bunch of things, right? It's constant data mining. It's constant say, so you say small yeses incrementally, and then suddenly like you're a victim of just मतलब कुछ करने के लिए भी you have to just show papers. It's like that show paper style, world that we are living in now. And, I saw that you've been actively fighting against that. And I also know for a fact, log vaccine certificates fake bhi kar rahe hain, But it's just this mandatory thing that you have to have now to live in India. How have you been combating it alone? मतलब चल क्या रहा है वो?
So I think there's a lot to update you on that. Firstly, the situation was like that beginning 2021. That's when the rollout started, and then that's when there's a lot of pressure from authorities, from politicians, from academia. Everyone was telling you to get vaccinated and it's safe and effective and everything. So that is the time when the mandates were really messing people's life up and making it hell for people who don't want to take it. I mean, for people who want to take it, it's their choice, So there's nothing like I'm all for choice, so I'm not gonna sit here and like deride
Our Home Minister once said fundamental rights are a Western concept. They do not apply to India. Human rights. That's what he said.
He clearly hasn't read the Constitution, and I have a lot to say about that as well, because people don't really understand rights in this country, man. So if you've been exposed to libertarians, our conception and the way rights actually work is they're a negative concept. So even all these socialist concepts like right to healthcare, right to education, you don't have a right to anything just because you're born, man. Like, I mean, it's like, okay, the state is going to come and forcefully take money from a bunch of section of society,
right,
and then be obliged to give it to you. Why? I mean, I'm not kind of saying that poor people shouldn't be helped or whatever, but in a libertarian setting, you wouldn't really justify stealing money from people and giving it to them. You would rely on voluntary donations, and you would realize that, I mean, just because someone is poor, it's not your fault that they're poor. I mean, there's empathy over there, and there are various... The thing is, government comes in as a solution to the problems they've caused. The reason people are poor is because of fiat currency and because of government regulation, and like, so you need 22 or 23 licenses to start a business
unlucky or
out
stupid.
here.
Let's also not...
I mean, and everyone is not equal. Like, all this leftist propaganda about political correctness, and I mean, everyone's the same, and men and women, we can probably get into that later as well. But these things aren't true, man. Like, everyone's different. Everyone's born with a unique set of capabilities. And depending on how much work they put in or what kind of acumen they have when they're born determines their success in life. And we're all subject to the same external factors when it comes to inflation.
नहीं bro, तेरा privilege है, ये सब बातें मत कर.
Come on, man. Like, I mean, I know you're being silly, but I know this myself because I mean, I've literally molded my way out, and that's what I believe. Like, it's very easy to be a victim in life and to feel like, I mean, there was a time where no one took me seriously and I was always laughed at for my beliefs or whatever. And you just have to push through that kind of stuff. So I'm just saying that people, the entire promotion that's being done right now, especially in Western academia and the entire university circuit out there, is to make you feel like a victim.
Yeah, it's cool.
And then it kind of legitimizes people to censor other people.
Let's talk about South Asian voices in a white country, guys, because that's what we're about. बहुत ज़्यादा हो रहा है. It's causing a lot of mediocre people to use these labels and sort of get ahead in their careers by being the voices.
It's so easy to throw labels out. Anything you disagree with, you're a homophobe, you're a misogynist, you're this, you're that. I mean, engage with the content, na? I mean, they're always trying to project you as someone so they don't have to address your argument. Right. It's just like, naam bula diya, abhi theek hai. Like, you're in some different category and I don't even have to address you. Right. That's what a lot of cultural discourse has
Yohan, wo conspiracy theorist.
Wahi na, wo anti-vaxxer, wo conspiracy theorist, that paranoid schizophrenic. Take your pick, but that's what the discourse has come down to, and that's exactly what long form conversations like this help to break. Because people assume a lot of knowledge, man. Like, they think they've figured stuff out, but when you actually listen to people who've done a lot of work in a specific subject, you realize that you don't really know what you're talking about most of the time.
Right.
And that arrogance kind of comes out. I've seen this in life as well, and it's a very popular quote. Like, people who've put a lot of time and study into a specific area, they're very humble and kind of not pushy about their beliefs that way.
Right.
Because they know there's so much more to know. And instead, the people who've dabbled in, watch a couple of videos, believe the earth is flat, and suddenly they're like damn loud about it. That this is the truth and I've figured it out. And there's so much more to know about astrophysics, and like people have gone and done degrees, which is where I agree with some of the skeptics on their commentary about the conspiracy movement. Because people do get very whack and people do get paranoid, and they start projecting their paranoia on everything.
Right.
Even, I mean, I face it in my community because I'm kind of like a figure. So the kind of paranoia people subject to Bill Gates or to Klaus Schwab or whatever, many of them subject to me. They think I'm a Freemason secretly. And
क्या होता है Freemason?
It's a secret society. Most people in that are not a problem because everything is like, see, when it comes to secret societies also everything is compartmentalized. So people think that, okay, this guy went to the World Economic Forum, so he knows everything and he's pushing the Great Reset knowingly.
Did you?
And sorry, no, I didn't.
Okay.
But I'm saying the reason people think I'm a Freemason is because I went to the lodge once. So Freemasonry is a secret society that started out, at least the mainstream story is that in the 17th century, Scottish Rite of Freemasonry started. And then tab se they've, their version of it is they formed a society to preserve occult knowledge and to kind of help people with spiritual advancement and all that.
There's the obvious Illuminati, and then there's the Skull and Bones. Like, is there any credibility to all of these? कि वाकई में exist करते हैं नहीं?
Illuminati also, I feel like the YouTube videos and all have made it very misrepresented from what it actually
exists करता है. You really think that?
It doesn't exist in the form that these YouTubers and people who make content on music videos will make you believe that, oh, this celebrity is part of that and he's going attending these rituals and he gave his soul up to the devil and that's why he got all this all that exists at a very, you can say, transactional level. Like people do, you can say, make sacrifices or make certain compromises to get up in their career. That's a reality, man.
Yeah.
Even if you talk about Bollywood or whether you talk about the Western music industry, on the entertainment industry or whatever. But it's not like everyone who's fucking coming and flashing a one eye symbol on TV or something is part of some cult that's trying to control you. But at the same time, there is legitimacy to secret societies. Okay, especially when you're talking about Skull and Bones. Okay, so I'll tell you, like, Skull and Bones mein, the people who go and become top decision makers in Western society, like American politicians, business elite, like all these people pass out of Yale and go to Skull and Bones, where some of the
Yale.
Yes, Yale University, like that's where Skull and Bones is hosted. So I mean, if you just follow some of the kind of rituals they do, it's very freaky, man. Like, I mean, if I was to describe one of them, they have a ritual where one initiate will lie down on a coffin and then other people will like jerk off to them while he's naked. Okay, and this is all guy fest. You can go and look this up.
This is an adult power hungry fraternity,
Exactly.
basically.
Yeah. And then if you see, there's a lot of convergence between Skull and Bones and Bohemian Grove. I mean,
Bohemian Grove, I know
if you've been in America, you must have heard of Alex Jones by now.
Of course.
So he's the first guy that
I was hoping you'd pray to him also. You were Alex Jones.
No, I mean, I have many disagreements with many people in the conspiracy movement, like even David Icke or Alex Jones or whatever. But I've read many of them. I've followed many of them for years, so I know where they're coming from. So Alex Jones is the first guy that broke into Bohemian Grove. Bohemian Grove is like this huge redwood forest in America, where all these top elite, whether it's
House of Cards, they do a parody of that, right? In the show House of Cards, there's a secret society where all of them meet.
I haven't seen that, so I can't comment.
But
on that
it's in a forest.
It's a real thing. They have a kind of a get together once a year. It's a redwood forest, and one of the rituals that got exposed is they're worshipping this 40-foot stone owl. It's called Moloch in their esoteric traditions. It's the god they worship for a very long time. A lot of people who are part of this network, and they literally set the owl on fire. And they had this boat come in where there was a like literal child or a mock child. I don't know about that, but whatever it was, you can just see the mindset is very disgusting, because they burned that 40-foot stone owl. They're chanting all kinds of shit, and then this child comes and this cries of the child like screeching and shouting and all this stuff, you know. So even if they simulated that, even if that was like a fake child, and they just think about the mindset to kind of simulate that in a ritual, and it becomes all the more eerie when you follow the ancient evidence on this, because in the previous historical times, a lot of groups would actually sacrifice children to the gods, especially if you study Central American culture, the Mayans and all.
I know about the Mayans.
They would literally sacrifice children to the gods.
So you think that has sort of had residues in the modern world as well?
It doesn't have residues. It's an ongoing fact. If you study political pedophilia, elite Satanism, there have been many. I mean, especially with the.
I know for a fact that the Democrats had like this rumor going around कि Hillary जो है एक pizza parlor के अंदर pedophile drink चलाती है.
Dude, I'll tell you what, they intentionally set up these kind of stories so it keeps people away from looking into the genuine like stuff that actually exposes them to great detail. So I do find a lot of I don't fully agree with Pizzagate. There's a lot of issues with
it's called Pizzagate.
Yeah, it is. But you can look into other cases that are very, very credible. Like there's this lady called Kathy O'Brien. Okay, if you read, she has 2 books, Transformation of America, and there's another one as well. So in that, she literally describes how she was a sex slave since she was born, and she was kind of groomed by top American elite like Gerald Ford and Justin Trudeau's father, Pierre Trudeau. She takes names in the book. She exposes like whatever she's been through in terms of horrific like torture in her childhood in order to kind of make her controlled in a certain way. And this came out later as well. Like if you study American politics, you'll figure out MK Ultra. So there was this program that the CIA was involved in, wherein they would literally like take people and subject them to hallucinogens, electric shock, torture, all this kind of stuff, to compartmentalize their mind and create multiple personalities. Like this
I can't. I'm just thinking of Call of Duty, Black Ops. It's the game where they do that to one of their soldiers, Alex Mason. Usko numbers वगैरह सुनाते रहते हैं.
No, even in this movie called Manchurian Candidate, they kind of have a similar theme as well. So I mean, the thing with Hollywood is lot of directors and stuff are in touch with people from intelligence. Like even the James Bond movie, it was not someone's imagination. Yeah, man. I mean, we can probably get into extraterrestrials and all later if that's not too far out territory for you.
नहीं कुछ भी नहीं है far out.
So we come to that, but my point.
दोस्तों extreme बात तो योहान कर रहा है. मैं तो सिर्फ एक host हूँ, guys. No responsibility, no skin in the game. Those are buys.
No, I mean like you can go and check out my channel and see like everything I put out is after a lot of hard study into anything. I just don't watch a video or two and like I take a long time to form my opinions, and I listen to a lot of skeptics as well. So before I was starting this, I was very underconfident. I'm like, I'm going to come out to all this stuff and then people are just going to thrash me because you know what, I'm not confident about what I'm saying. So I spend a lot of time listening to people like Michael Shermer and Richard Dawkins, like typical skeptics who would just coincidence theorists, like that. That's what I call them, like people like that. So in my own journey, I've seen that the more I've given time to listening to contrary opinions, it just makes my argument stronger.
But
because
it's so
I know where they're coming from. It's kind of, you have to challenge your cognitive biases because you want to get in an echo chamber, and that's what you're most used to when it comes to the human mind. Like that's why most people get stuck up in echo chambers and their own communities, and they're just like going around with the same kind of people and same ideology. And social media has helped to fuel a lot of that. Like these groups where people are just going on in their own thing, totally oblivious from other ways of looking at the world. And then when you actually face a breakdown, like when there's something that affects your belief system, that's when you open up and you're like, shit, there's so much out there, but my beliefs basically firewall all of that out. So that's the same kind of thing I see extending to conspiracy research as well, where people do get in that mindset. And that's what I was talking about, political pedophilia. So in that, there's so many credible things you can research. The MK Ultra program, where there have been, you can say, exposés of Belgian elite. Like there's a big satanic and pedophile scandal in Belgium where top royalty were involved. You can study the Epstein saga. So, I mean, Bill Clinton, many top people involved in that.
Donald Trump keh raha tha, I wish Ghislaine Maxwell well, which is like probably a symbol ki...
Yes, and that's very hypocritical, right? Because a lot of the, you can say, truther community in America, they kind of got on the Trump bandwagon.
Yeah.
And there's so much evidence about Trump as well, not being the best guy who's going to drain the swamp out.
Yeah.
It's like the same hopium every politician gives you. Like, I'm going to come to office and I'm going to like remove all these bad, evil people that are controlling the world and make America...
भाई आप भी तो घूम रहे थे एप्स्टीन के साथ
so but that's the bias na. So people want to project Trump as this kind of savior. At least the entire QAnon movement and all of that was about that basically. So again, I mean, like when I'm talking about conspiracies, that's the whole point I started out with, is that I do find a lot of, you can say, reason in what skeptics say about the conspiracy movement, because people do get very radicalized and they start projecting their mindset onto like everything's a conspiracy. But at the same time, the issue I find is that they're throwing the baby out of the bathwater, because there's a lot of genuine conspiracies that you can verify. And what is a conspiracy, man? It's kind of portrayed as, oh, मतलब conspiracy तो होता ही नहीं. Like that's how skeptics tend to talk about it.
हिंदी में बात करें साजिश,
षड्यंत्र
साजिश, हाँ,
षड्यंत्र बोले तो मतलब
you really have done your research.
It's a legally defined term,
yeah,
wherein it's just talking about how a few people collude to achieve a certain illegal objective.
Conspirators बोलते हैं जिन्हें, हाँ,
वही. And I mean, इसका अगर सबूत की बात करें तो you can find endless, I mean, admissions from the elite itself in their books. Like people haven't bothered to read this stuff, but if you read David Rockefeller is like a very prominent part of the Rockefeller family, died at the age of 101 couple of years back, and he set up a lot of these institutions where he was pulling in people from top areas of society in different paths, like in politics, in intelligence, in media, and they were coming together to create like this new international order, whether it's economic or political order. That's something they've always strived for. They call themselves the internationalists, and they've worked to create that. So my point is, you can go and read their own books. You can go and read David Rockefeller. You can go and read so many other authors, George Orwell, Aldous Huxley. Like किताबें पढ़ो, मतलब just read them so many years back, 50, 100 years
Huxley
back.
क्या कर रहा था?
Huxley was actually connected with the Fabian Society. That's another strand of the
I thought he was just the
society.
father of LSD.
So
Doors of perception and all that jazz.
If you study Huxley's brother, Julian Huxley, he was an out eugenicist. Like eugenicists literally believed that we could pick you up the street, we could determine if you're fit to procreate or not, and then forcefully sterilize you.
इसका भाई और यहाँ दुनिया को एसिड का रंग बता रहे हैं. Wow, bro.
Yeah, man. So I mean, there's so many areas we can go off to, but we're talking about this thing, Bohemian Grove. Right. So that's the kind of stuff that goes on over there. And I mean, just look at me with a straight face and tell me you want me to trust the system or whatever, when some of the top people who are involved in that are going and doing this kind of shit.
What's their incentive? How do they like sort of get recruited? And do we have, हमारे पास India में, do we have like these secret groups of it all?
I'm pretty sure they exist, but in my research, I haven't been able to find. That's why I don't make all these claims. Like, a lot of these people who come on YouTube and talk about Bollywood Illuminati just because they saw some symbols or like.
भाई आपको पता है रात को शाहरुख खान चिपकली बन जाते हैं.
So that's the kind of stuff I find like paranoid projection.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I'm all for pushing for things if there's evidence to talk about them, but just thinking कि ये दुनिया में हो रहा है तो यहाँ पे भी हो रहा होगा, मतलब it's stretching the imagination a little bit. What I do believe, because I've done detailed content on this, is that there are many Indian collaborators who work with these globalist bodies and kind of you can call them the Illuminati if you want, but that's what we're talking about when we're talking about the Illuminati. It's not a literal secret society. The Illuminati is what the elite who think they have a lot of occult knowledge that the rest of the people don't have, about how to manipulate people, about knowledge about various subjects that we're touching on in this podcast.
Right.
They've hoarded all of that and kept it to themselves. There's a clique in society which is sitting at a very high level, which has studied all this knowledge, and they actively dissuade other people from looking into it, saying it's woo-woo or it's whatever, quackery, just don't look into it. There's no truth to any of this stuff that we use, and they've kept it to themselves. That is what they refer to as the Illuminati, because the Illuminati literally means the illuminated ones. Like in the kingdom of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. So they think that because they've kept all of us in darkness about these subjects. And just think about it, like who's talking about this stuff in India, bro? Like, I mean, there's very handful of people, and I mean, even with the study I've done, the way I see people talking about it, a lot of conjecture, a lot of hyperbole, a lot of exaggeration. There's so much credible stuff you can dig into, but people usually go for the loose ends, where it's easy to debunk them. And they become kind of fuel for the other side. Like, ye dekho, ye chutiye log isme believe karte. Like, what are you going? Like, they're not even credible to talk about. So that's what I mean when I talk about that balance between having healthy skepticism as well as not being so paranoid that you like just project your mind onto everything. There's a middle path. Okay, the conspiracies happen, but at the same time, reason and logic and scientific method is very important. Like, you have to bring those two together in order to come to a coherent, you can say, worldview about what's really going on in society, because I do believe that there's a lot of polarization on both sides, man.
मेरे को ऐसा लगता है in India, in terms of health and I guess in terms of political opinions and just the environment, a bunch of things, a lot of our country is still susceptible to the opinions of experts, right? Like fundamentally, one of the major issues I face when I propel my biohacking belief systems on कि भाई मैं ये कर रहा हूँ is this immediate डॉक्टर ने तो नहीं बोला, डॉक्टर तो मना करता है. हमारे यहाँ पे इतना ज़्यादा ओवर रिलायंस ऑन डॉक्टर्स है, राइट, एंड विद देयर डिग्रीज एंड व्हाट नॉट एंड एलोपैथिक ट्रीटमेंट्स कि एंड इवन विद लाइक फॉर एग्जांपल like you mentioned in your podcast you did with the Corbett guy about India has 5 or 6 Faucis but no one really knows about them, कि यहाँ पे there is so much reliance on experts कि citizen journalism, citizen biohacking या citizen कुछ भी is sort of condemned. And there isn't support, and the majority masses want to believe what the experts say. कि भाई आपने बूस्टर लगवा लिया, भाई क्या कहते हैं, टीवी पे आया था बूस्टर, हाय बूस्टर लेने जाते हैं. एक तरह का herd mentality and like blind reliance on experts is what I see.
Mass formation psychosis.
Yeah, is that what it's called?
Yeah, I mean that's what people like Robert Malone and all got deplatformed.
Achha, Robert Malone.
Yes, that's the inventor of mRNA technology who went on Joe Rogan, and then there was this. You're talking about Joe Rogan got a lot of backlash, right? For getting he got 2 people on, Robert Malone and Peter McCullough. Right. Peter McCullough is one of the most published people in cardiology. He speaks fervently about like adverse events that are taking place, especially from mRNA vaccination. And they've tried. I mean, this is the same thing that they do, like character assassination. Go after them. I mean, just try to make up something that damages the reputation, and so you can avoid discussing the facts that they're bringing up. Right. So that's the kind of stuff that Joe Rogan got deplatformed for talking about that. But sorry, what is the question again? I
was saying कि यहाँ पे we have an over reliance on medical experts and political experts to form our opinions, and अपने digging करने के लिए you have to, I don't know.
This is where I agree with this guy who got on, Abhijit Chawla. So he was talking about the Indian education system and talking about how the Britishers came in and like our Gurukul system was much better, and then they put the system of education of us called the Macaulay system, and they literally have designed it in such a way where they've made it so that people don't really think. They aren't taught how to think. Like if you study the classical liberal tradition of the 17th, 18th century, like the way people learned is by the trivium methodology. It's known as that in these kind of circles of where people are talking about how do we learn really. So it's all about taking in data and like information, the raw material from a bunch of different sources, and then you like apply a logical filters through it, you apply a mind to it, you weed out the inconsistencies, and then you come up with a belief system. And the more you've researched and delved into any area, the stronger your kind of views become and the more valid they become. It's not like this whole new age idea that what everyone says is important. That's total baloney, as I told you earlier. Like it's all about proof of work. The more time you put in, which is why people are so obsessed with degrees. Like what does a degree mean?
Right.
When we're talking about conventional education, it just means that someone has gone in and has put in time into studying a specific area. Now my whole kind of issue with that is that you can do it without going to a university. It just depends on like what kind of sources you've consumed. So there are many you can say so-called thought leaders online who watch a couple of random YouTube videos and think they know something about a subject. But I mean, if someone does it properly, like I mean, and if someone's honest with themselves about the kind of sources they're pursuing, and they're not going into this one bias where they're just pursuing one slant or one way of looking at things, and they actually open themselves up to a wide variety of things. But hey,
slants are so fun though. Just watching the slants. The guy who played Shaktiman, He's now doing a full right-wing slant on his YouTube channel. He's also running his own podcast. Hilarious stuff.
Sweet, man. But yeah, I mean, so that's the power and that's the inclination that people have to get locked up in cul-de-sacs where they just keep going in one. But if you're honest to yourself and if you pursue information from a wide variety of sources, I feel like you don't necessarily need to go to university to be able to be credible to talk about something. It's all about like what you've actually pursued and read. And that's coming to your question about this whole mindset we have of worshipping doctors or whatever. So, I mean, if you look at it in this way, people haven't been really taught to think, how to think exactly. And in the education system, what comes down is what we are teaching you is right, and you regurgitate that in your exam and you go up the ladder. So that's why original thinking and even you can say concepts about liberty, freedom, it's very lacking in India. In our country, most people are talking about कि free में क्या मिलना चाहिए. What should the government do in the social welfare program?
ऐसा नहीं लगता, considering that जैसे gun control, libertarianism, all of these things. I mean, I'm sort of regurgitating what the Home Minister said. But उनको इंडिया के अंदर apply करना, there are challenges because we don't have the cultural sort of like bedrock that supports it.
That's very true. I agree with that totally. And the way I perceive anarchy or libertarianism, it's not something that can be imposed. These are moral positions. Like these are positions that you arrive to when you realize that taxation is immoral or it's theft. Like because you're literally stealing money from a bunch of people and using it where they don't want to be used. Like for example, like
what is the alternative? Can we say, hey, use our taxes here and here? Could we do that?
We don't have that option, but right? Once we give it up, like we don't have any say on where it goes. So what libertarians and people who are ANCAPs or people like that, it's a spectrum, right? Libertarianism is not just everyone who believes that the state should be abolished. There's varying spectrums to it. Some people believe in a very minimal government where you're supposed to have very limited government involvement and government just involved in courts, in police, in military. Like these things that people can't conceptualize. How would it work without a state?
America में वो चल जाता है because they have a bedrock of self-reliance.
Exactly.
Right?
The culture out there is something I deeply love and respect because the American founding fathers really were way ahead of the time. And if you go and read their constitution, especially if you go and read their words about the Second Amendment, like they always spoke about the courts, they never use the word necessary for the politicians or for the courts or for the police because they realize that these institutions can be captured in case a tyrant ever rises to society and then people go into this mass formation psychosis where they'll end up supporting him, like Hitler, for example. Governments can get captured, judiciary can be compromised in many cases, police can be bought out. But the only thing that will protect people in case there's tyranny rising in a society is the militia, which is like a... you can say the armed populace, the general armed populace that is taught firearms training and that they know how to protect themselves. So they are the biggest threat to standing armies.
Do we have evidence for that? Like where like an armed militia is better off in defending themselves against a crisis, dictator, as opposed to one that is not?
So you can just think of it in this way. I mean, let's say an invader is trying to take over a society where there's no state and there's just an armed militia, right? There's no standing army as such. Firstly, what tyrants are looking for is the central point of power to hijack. if people in a society don't believe in a state, like they don't have this central authority figure that's dictating their lives, and people are living in a voluntary society, which means that there's no taxation. It's voluntary taxation. Like you pay for whatever you use. If you're using a road, then you pay for that. If you're using a defense service, which there will be a competition in that kind of society, you won't have just one police force that's monopoly funded by taxpayers. You would have
But
like an option.
wouldn't that allow for like several strong gangs of people to start emerging and fit?
Which is what we have right now, right? So I the best way to explain this is if people have a problem with anarchy, they should believe in world government. Like if people have a problem with anarchy, they should believe in world government, because on a world stage we do have anarchy right now. We don't have international courts that are bound, like nations aren't bound to the verdicts of
The International Court of Justice is a joke.
Yeah, we don't even have a world government yet, so it's not like we do have anarchy at a state level, right now. If you just see it, like there is no central power in the world which is telling states what to do, which is exactly why United States can go and invade Middle Eastern countries, and then the UN is just there as namesake
peacekeepers hain.
Wait, but they haven't been effective, at what they were so-called created to do. So if people don't believe in anarchy, you should believe in world government, because at a level of nation states, we do have anarchy right now, right? There's no world government that's dictating like, okay, this is the law for the world. We do have different countries which have a different set of laws. So you can say that there are different gangs of states that right now are competing for power. And I'm just projecting that at a level of the individual. Okay, so then if world government is not the answer to anarchy between states, then like why shouldn't we just go all the way down to the individual? That's the fundamental question.
But isn't the definition of anarchy fundamentally the abolishing of state completely?
Yes,
right?
true,
It's destroyal. So uske in a void, what happens?
If you go into anarchy, there are varying flavors. Like there are a lot of anarchists who come from the left, who I strongly disagree with. There's people like Bakunin and Proudhon and all these people who approach anarchy from a very communistic perspective, with no respect for property rights, with this whole fervent belief in like religion should be abolished, and it's not just the state, but they also believe that private property was a bad thing and that private property should be done with altogether. But that's not the anarchy that I subscribe to. I come from a very libertarian position where we believe in self-ownership and property rights, where we believe that this body is ours, is the same principle on which we're opposing mandates, like vaccine mandates. And then whatever we touch with our body in the world, or like, you mix our energy with, that's unowned, it becomes ours. So that's how we develop property rights. Like it's an extension of ourselves in the world.
It's what we go and acquire.
Yeah, exactly.
Simply.
What we do work on to transform something that's unknown to become our property in that sense.
Right.
Like first use. That's the principle on which we derive property rights from. So as an anarchist, I believe in the non-aggression principle. I believe that force is only justified when someone initiates it against you. So we don't believe in victimless crime laws. There are so many laws all across the world where people are punished where there's no victim. There's no physical victim of their harm. Like you can talk about speech laws, you can talk about money laundering laws, you can talk about laws against tax evasion, you can talk about laws against speech, like where we're offending a certain religion, like what we saw right now with this whole Nupur Sharma thing. Right? So what we are saying is that laws that criminalize vices, okay, like drug laws, or we'll fine you if you don't wear a helmet, like this stupid pillion rider thing that's come up right now, or we'll fine you if you don't wear a seatbelt. We don't think those are like justified, because the only time when force is involved, and that involves force used by the state to either fine someone or to put someone in prison, is when someone has initiated force against someone else. And we don't believe in mental assault. Like we don't believe that. That's the whole thing that supports our arguments against political correctness as well. Because there, people are made to have this belief that, like whatever you feel is your right, and your right to be offended is above the right of someone's free speech. Which is total bullshit.
So, but getting anarchy into a seatbelt is aisa nahi, people can die if they don't wear a seatbelt. No?
Yeah, but that's the thing with vices. See, we are all born on this planet which is blessed with free will. Some skeptics might disagree, but I strongly believe in free will, and we have the liberty to make mistakes for ourselves. That's how we grow. If I control your life from childhood, you're talking about vices, like if you don't wear a seatbelt, you can die. But if you don't go and take sunlight every day...
Vices तो ऐसा होता है कि यार कोई नशे करता है, ऐसा कुछ करता है. Typically, we don't think about... We think of it as against the law.
Exactly. But that's the thing that's wrong, right? If you're punishing someone for a vice, then it opens a very slippery slope. See, in terms of law, like, because I've been very fundamentally involved in the legal system, and my group Awaken India Movement, we work with some of the top lawyers in the country to fight the cases in court. So I'll give you a very pertinent example of what happens when a society accepts that vices should be punished, because it leads to many problems in other areas where you didn't realize it would lead to. For example, everything in law is a precedent. So if you give the government pass in one area, they can apply the same principle and extend it. I'll give you a very, very good example. In the Aadhaar case, Okay, if you see the arguments that are going on, the government advocate Tushar Mehta, he came and argued in court. This is many years back, that we don't have absolute individual rights in our country. Okay, they aren't absolute, and that someone's right to their own body is not absolute. This is literally what he came and argued in court. And you know what examples he cited?
What?
He cited drug laws. Okay, like if the individual's right to the body was absolute, we would not have drug laws, which is very logical. It's true. Like, if you literally believe that this is this guy's life, he can do whatever the fuck he wants with his body. Kuch bhi kar lo, nashe kar lo, live the worst lifestyle, eat the worst junk food. Teri life hai. As the minute you initiate assault or aggression against anyone else, the law applies to you. But until then, you're on your own. You know, because it's something you're doing to your body. Vast majority of drug users aren't criminals. They're just like doing it to themselves. And even drugs is a very broadly used term. There's many different kinds of things, and you have to get into the specifics of that.
I mean, people take Alpraxis all day.
Yeah, I mean, there's no skepticism about pharmaceutical drugs. It's all about the drugs that have been illegal. Anyway, so because we've conceded that to the government, that they can ban drugs for our own good. Because if they didn't ban it, then all kinds of arguments come up, like crime would go up, and it's helping drugs to get to young children who get misled in life and all of that. Because we can... Totally different discussion. I'm not going into the specifics of that. But I'm just saying, if we give up that right, if we let the government punish vices, they came and used that point as a point in court to argue against Aadhaar. Saying that Aadhaar is justified because these people don't have an absolute right to their bodies. So we can go and collect their biometrics. I'll give you another example. Now, because we have accepted fines on seat belts and helmets and all this stuff, the government has started seeing itself as a parents' patri. This is the same word that the Maharashtra government used in Bombay High Court.
What did they say?
Parents' patri. It means that the state is a kind of caretaker of the society. Like, they are obliged to protect us from harm, from like medical harm or whatever.
That they define.
Yeah. So, of course, it's all vague, man. Like, they can... So, I'll tell you how they use it in the vaccine mandate case. They said that, like, we were arguing that the vaccines don't stop transmission, which is, they acknowledge that. They acknowledge even the WHO saying they don't stop transmission. So there's no threat. Like, I can't force a vaccine on you because you're going to go and spread the virus to someone. There's no difference between you and me. There's a lot of studies that have shown this. They've compared viral load between vaccinated and unvaccinated people, found it to be the same. There's a huge amount of breakthrough infections, and majority of cases and stuff in many areas have come from predominantly vaccinated people. All this is there. Like, you know, this data has gone to the petition that I've been fundamentally involved in fighting. So the government agreed to that. But they were literally like, no, we still have the right to force a mandate vaccine on people, because if we don't do it, they will land up in the hospital. Okay. And the slippery slope to that is what people don't realize. Like, people might think it's justified for some condition, but then they can use the same principle to extend into every area. Like, tomorrow the government can come and tell you like, get out and take sunlight for half an hour every day. We're going to ban your fast food. We're going to tax fast food. We're going to not let you drink. We're going to not let you do anything that's bad for you. You have to get the optimum amount of sleep. You understand like what kind of slippery slope that can go into, where you find that in the name of doing good for you, the government is controlling every fine aspect of your life. And then where's the growth in life? Where do we have the opportunity to make mistakes and grow and learn? It's gone, right? It's just this government that's projecting their version of good and what's supposed to be good on you onto society. And then it lands up, individual choice goes away. See, the thing in life is, I've realized, we always learn the best through our own mistakes. Like, someone can tell you whatever the fuck they want to tell you, but when you experience that you committed a mistake and you go through the grieving process and you learn from that, is when you go to the next level in life. Then you realize that, okay, that was a learning experience for me to evolve higher. I've seen this play out many times in my own life as well. So when you project that to a societal level, and the government is literally telling people you can't do this because it's harmful for you, it can evolve into an outright dictatorship. Which is why as libertarians we hold the line, no, like, you can, the only time government can mandate or force something is if you can prove that A is initiating violence against B. And if you extend that, take very practical examples, I'll make it difficult for people to think. Even with freedom of speech, like, free speech absolute is, because unless I call for like violence against someone, like imminent threats to force are what we are against, right? So if I'm just giving an opinion or even hate speech or whatever the hell the West is demonizing, if you go to the West, there's so many laws in Canada where if you don't call someone by the right pronoun, like a parent doesn't call the child by the right pronoun. So that they have legal consequences for that. Like, I said a story, I think last week, where a Norwegian feminist is put in 3 years of jail for, I think, saying something like, men can't be lesbians or something, biological men can't be lesbians.
So jail mein dal diya?
Yes, for 3 years. So My point is that the reason it's important to believe in these principles is because the cultural context, states can really use it to trample on individual rights in many ways.
Yeah.
Right. So if we don't hold that line, then these kind of laws get justified. We can't speak freely. So in India, if you see the cultural context, we are very, very religious, and it's kind of in our constitution that we're not allowed to use speech that offends someone's religious
हमारे जो
sentiments,
free speech
right?
laws, I've spoken to a bunch of lawyers and friends who are like smart in the free speech domain. It's very vague. It isn't absolute at all. हम लोग, they've defined free speech, but then there are exceptions, right? The other problem...
That's everywhere. That's the very, if we go very fundamentally into civics and into politics, this is the problem I have with the concept of a constitution. Okay, like the constitution for me is the non-aggression principle. Like it's a universal rule. Anytime a sentient being that can comprehend moral concepts initiates force against another sentient being. So this does not apply to the animal kingdom. Right? Because they don't have the capability to comprehend moral concept or to respect someone else's bodily autonomy or property rights. They just don't have that. So it doesn't apply to them. But for beings who do have that, who want their own body and property left alone. I mean, tell me one guy who is like, nahi, theek hai, you can assault my body against my will. No one believes that, right? So at least you could argue that. That's why, it's not a prominent point I like to use, because people sometimes like to inflict self-harm and stuff. But
why I really enjoy cutting my nose with a blade. It's so fun.
But that's what voluntary slavery is fine. If someone wants to do it, it's all right. If you want to give up your life to live in a state, that's your right. You should be able to have that. So when anarchists are talking about a stateless society, it's not like we want to force everyone in to join. You can have like experiments in the world where you have an area with a limited government, with a small government. You have an area of the world where there's no state, and people are figuring all this out through the market and competition. And those forces are at work, like voluntary forces are at work. When I say voluntarism, I'm mainly advocating for a capitalist society, which is not the kind of monopoly capitalism that we live in today, but a genuinely competitive environment where there's a lot of competition in every area, whether it's the cops, whether it's the judiciary, whether it's the business world. There's lot of, you can say, incentives for businesses to behave in a good way and in a sound way, because reputation matters a lot. So we can have these experiments so people figure it out. Like you live in a minarchist society, you can have an area of the world that's totally uncapped, and we figure it out, through practical experience. Like, okay, what works best, or then people can migrate wherever they want. So there is choice in that world as well. It's not like I'm telling you have to like come into an anarchist society. And like you said, the cultural context is not there in this country. So anarchy or these kind of ideas are not something that can be imposed. They can only come about when a culture changes. And that's where conversations like this, and that's where content creation is helpful. Like, you get these ideas out, you create an intellectual base, and then people choose what they want to subscribe to. And that's how you have this culture emerge in America as well, because they fought the British, and that's when a lot of these ideas came up. Like Frederick Bastiat came up with this entire individual liberty concept in Europe, and then it expanded to thinkers in the West, and that's how this entire concept of libertarianism came up. There have been many thinkers who've forwarded this field, and sadly that's not been there in India, because before the British came, we were largely, you can say, intellectually governed by the Vedas and our religious texts and the entire Gurukul system or whatever. And then the British came in, and this entire, you can say, scientific materialist paradigm was put on people, at least through the mainstream education system. And the discourse has prominently been, you can say, involved with culture, with religion, with these kind of issues. And the entire concept of rights, as the libertarians or, people who believe in free markets, who believe in true capitalism, that's never really penetrated, because India has always been a socialist country. For example, the word socialist is right in our constitution. It's right there, which is something I have a big problem with. So what I was telling you earlier is that governments have always made rights as in the constitution as something that are subjected to going away. Like कुछ emergency आया कि हम लोग कुछ public health का threat बना देंगे, तो we can take this away from
temporary मौज है.
Yeah. So but what we believe and what is the absolute truth is that rights are objective. Like you are born with self-ownership, you are born with property rights, and no one can take that from you. Whatever the fuck happens, whether it's an emergency or whether it's a conjured up public health threat or whatever it is. If you cannot show me that you are a threat to someone else imminently, I can't justify using force against you. That is the worldview and lens with which libertarians evaluate whether, like, what are we talking about? We're just talking about, okay, is the law justified or not? किसी ने law बना दिया doesn't mean it's absolute truth. Like you have relative laws all around the world. Something's good to do in one place, something's illegal to do in another place. Right? So there's no absolute truth to that anyway. So what we are saying is that we consistently apply the non-aggression principle across cultures, across countries, and then we just don't agree with the laws that overstep their boundary, when they are penalizing someone when no one has harmed anyone else, we think those laws are illegitimate and should go. But they won't magically go away on their own. You need a culture, you need a kind of intellectual wing in society that's putting pressure on the political system and producing those kind of candidates. Like in America, you do have the kind of culture, which is why you have a Libertarian Party, which is why you have...
Which gets no votes, by the way.
Yeah, but I mean, if you see the Ron Paul kind of... do you know about Ron Paul? So he's a Libertarian senator who literally used to go and argue in Congress about why the Fed should end, why the CIA should end. So hardcore Libertarian guy, spent a lot of years in political office, figured out that one guy can't, change the situation that way. And he used to propound a lot of these ideas in the mainstream, and he had a very successful campaign. A lot of people voted for him in 2012 and all that. So there are people like that. There's a base in America where at least people have some political outlet to let these ideas out, and at least if they... See, the thing is, to go towards that kind of society, it's kind of like you have to take steps. You're not going to go there all the way. So the way that I'm trying to bring this in our country is at least taking steps so that we can get closer. Like anything I can do to get closer to my individual rights is better. Okay, so if you live in a status paradigm, what's more closer to individual rights? Having vaccine mandates or not having vaccine mandates? Of course, not having mandates. So what I have done with my work and with Awaken India Movement is that a group that a couple of us founded like 1.5 years ago, is that we worked in the legal system to help to reverse these mandates, whether that's mask mandates, whether that's vaccine mandates, and we've been successful. If you followed what I've done in the Bombay High Court, we won our case earlier this year, where the judge ruled that all the orders that the state government had passed were illegal because they did not maintain minutes. And
yeah, you said no, ki central government has officially said ki the vaccine is not mandated. States apne hisab se they're
that was the prominent talking point 1 year back. But now the Supreme Court has also ruled in our favor. So I'll summarize the Supreme Court judgment for you. It's a 110-page judgment where they basically said that there is no evidence the state could produce, central government could produce, or any of the states could produce. All the states, there are like 5-6 states who were party, which we'd brought in because they had mandates going on. So they were arguing the case in court, and none of them could actually show that a vaccinated person spreads less than an unvaccinated person. Okay, so because of that, the judge ruled that these people could not produce any contrary evidence. So until there is such evidence which shows that the vaccines do reduce transmission,
right?
Okay, and they do reduce the risk of someone passing an infection to others. Until then, the mandates are not proportionate. They call it, like, they use 3 kind of lenses to check if some law the state has passed is in line with the constitution or not. There's proportionality, there's legality, and there's one more. There's a aim, like it should achieve the objective that is the government is saying its stated objective it should achieve. So it did not pass that test, and the court quashed it. They were like, hey, it's a mandate's illegal, and not just for states, even for private organizations, even for everyone. Like vaccine mandates are now quashed in India. No one can legally ask you. You can go with the Supreme Court judgment. We've made it very easily accessible. Like we've highlighted the relevant points.
You can show it if people are asking you that.
Yeah, and no one can legally ask. I'll give you a good case. So Symbiosis University, they had got a vaccine mandate for the employees. Okay, like couple of months back, and Supreme Court order came in, and then this one guy wasn't being paid his salary. He wasn't being allowed to go to work.
और उसको वैक्सीन लगवाना पड़ रहा था फिर भी.
हाँ, नहीं लगाया उसने. बॉम्बे हाई कोर्ट गया वो, and he was like, सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने जजमेंट दे दिया अभी, like, what the fuck are you guys talking about, and I mean, the judge didn't even have to rule. The company itself said, yeah, we're going to give him his salary, we're going to give him compensation because we've restricted his fundamental rights, and we're going to let him back to work. So that's the, result of the Supreme Court judgment working out. Even if the Supreme Court judgment did not come, the Bombay High Court judgment itself we won a couple of months back because they quashed all the orders. They said that whatever orders the state has gotten to impose mandates and restrictions, they're all illegal. Because वो orders के पीछे कोई भी minutes नहीं थे. Like they have a task force, they have a Maharashtra state task force which makes recommendation to the chief secretary, and then the chief secretary passes these orders in the state. So कोई minutes maintain नहीं किया, कुछ भी नहीं किया, ऐसे मतलब जो आया वो order में डाल के mandate कर दिया. No reasoning given in the minutes, nothing. Okay, so that's what the Chief Justice caught them on mainly. And of course, like, they're supposed to comply with the central government. Because under the Disaster Management Act, like, legally speaking, purely legally speaking, according to the law, like, I'm a libertarian, but since I'm involved in fighting the system, I do have a very good understanding of how laws work, at least for the areas that I'm involved in. So as far as the Disaster Management Act goes, under that, the states are supposed to follow the guidelines laid down by the center. They can't take a contrary stand. Like, if the center has not taken a stand on something, then they go to free and expand on that. But if the center has a strong stand,
they have to fall in line.
They have to fall in line and make sure that the response is coordinated. That's in the DM Act. So वो लोग DM Act भी follow नहीं कर रहे थे.
Sorry, what? DM Act?
The Disaster Management Act. That's the prominent act that was used to pass the mandates, pass the mask mandates, restrictions, capacity restrictions, COVID के time में कि कितने लोग आ सकते हैं. All of that was legally powered by the Disaster Management Act. So under that act itself, the central government has a stand that vaccines are voluntary. So they're supposed to make it voluntary, but they went against that. So, I mean, they engaged in blatant illegality according to their own law. Like, chalo, apna non-aggression principle chhod do, but unke khud ke law ke hisab se they did not live up to that. So now we have a brilliant lawyer, and we have a couple of them now who have a very good understanding of the constitution and how to use that to fight for individual rights, which is something as a libertarian that I strive for. Like, I'm not going to manifest my anarchist society in a couple of years or something. It's a very long game, dude. Like, you have to work to change people's mindsets. And
especially with our bedrock of collectivism.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. Like, Indians are largely collectivist, socialists. See, the thing is, thinking in terms of individual rights, liberty, it takes reason, it takes logic. And there are various factors, right? Even nutritionally speaking, most of our country is predominantly vegetarian. I do think that affects people's cognitive abilities and, the way they're able to process.
We love carbs here, huge on carbs.
We love grains as well, right?
Yeah.
So I think that these issues do make it a problem for people to comprehend a lot of things, and the culture is also lacking, as you were saying. So you can't impose these ideas on people. They have to come ground up. People have to change their thinking. Then accordingly, that starts projecting onto the politicians, because the way people think automatically, like, why are politicians in power who are constantly promising people free stuff? Because people want that. People think that a government ko dena chahiye, government should have this social welfare program. What they don't realize is because they haven't studied economics really. So they don't understand that everything has a, you can't just look at a specific program and see the immediate effects. You have to think about the long-term effects. It's called the broken window fallacy in economics, where for a certain government intervention, what Keynesians and the mainstream economists look at is the short-term achievement. Like, what if the government's coming and launching a program like Manrega to help poor people? They are just looking at that outcome. They're not seeing the opportunity cost. Like, they took money from taxpayers and they gave it to this group of people who could get that money without really, you can say, being competitive in a capitalist.
But kuch logon ko zarurat bhi to hoti hai. Some people are just like plain out unlucky. What about that?
But that's what I'm saying. So, like, just think about it in a one-to-one way. Wherever you want to evaluate a law, think about it in a very individual setting. Okay, like, let's say I am poor, I am unfortunate, like, I didn't get the right things in life because of which I have a condition. Just to stop you there, like, even the UK and the US have welfare stamps and dole money, and ye sab wo log bhi karte hain, despite not being overtly socialist nations, even they do it. But that's why we have Austrians and libertarians in America, because they aren't there, and the left and the liberals have totally, like, hijacked the culture now. So it's become a big problem, because American culture is also degrading. Like, here we are talking about bringing that culture in. There they are fighting to preserve whatever culture, bedrock of individual rights and liberties and First Amendment, Second Amendment, because there's an entire cultural Marxist takeover in America and Western society, where the people who get triggered too easily, the people who believe in political correctness, the people who believe that their opinions have more right than someone else's free speech. The other people who are degrading that culture, and there are people who are fighting to preserve it over there. Here we're talking about, like, just introducing it. So there are definitely a lot of problems in Western society. It's now not perfect. I would say if you want to get closest to the individual rights and property rights that I'm talking about, it would be America in its very nascent stage. Because there I can find you court cases, for example, like, property rights when applied work so brilliantly to protect the small man.
You mean when they first set up shop in America, जब Plymouth में आए थे वो लोग UK से? Around that time?
Just after the American Revolution, after they had the Constitution, the state was just starting.
Almost everyone had arms.
It was a very minimal government, and they had a big respect for individual rights and property rights. So much so that I'll give you one example. There was a prominent case in America, where a train company literally, like, polluted someone who's had a house next to the railway track, and the gas and the dirt from the train went on that guy's clothes. And this guy went to court as a property rights violation. Like, the train company was encroaching on my property rights. Like, this is my property, and he came and polluted it. Okay, so who won in that case? The guy won. It's not the train company that won, because they had this...
devil's advocate बनने का मन कर रहा है. I'm just saying कि ऐसे तो हम प्रगति कर ही नहीं पाएंगे. For example, if we want, like, better institutions, I don't know, like, better places, जैसे अच्छा school बनाना या कोई factory बनानी, or, like, shit can happen, we can, like, sort of rise up. If our definition of success is more modernization, for example, if we take that, उसके अंदर कोई बोलेगा नहीं भाई यार आपने मेरे कपड़े खराब कर दिए, but, like, that factory serves to help, like, 10,000 people. What happens then?
So that is the greater good fallacy that the state employs, right? Like, just because it's helping so many people doesn't mean you can crush people's individual right. This is the same argument that vaccine proponents also give.
Yeah.
Okay, we are helping, like, the greater good. But the whole
But how
problem
would progress
with that,
happen then? Like, would we not be in a state of stasis?
I'll tell you the problem with that. The people and the greater good does not exist. It's a fallacious concept. Like the people is a term used to define a group of individuals. Okay, and as long as you are valuing individual rights, you will always protect the community. Okay, there's no community doesn't have any rights. Okay, it's an abstract concept. It doesn't exist. Like, it doesn't have a conscious. It can't take its decisions on its own. You have individuals who come together, and then you use community or people to define them. So what we are talking about, okay, chalo, like, let's say a company is helping 10 lakh people. I'm not saying that if someone goes to them with a claim where they've harmed someone, the company will shut down. Just have to give them compensation and come up with better ways so that we don't encroach on other people's individual.
Shout out to Bhopal Gas Strategy.
Exactly. So that's the kind of mindset that also applies to corporations today.
Yeah.
If you think that corporations doing so much good in the world, helping to employ so many people, all of that, but they come and pollute a river and harm a couple of thousand people, right? So that's typically what the mainstream system sees it as, कि इतने सारे लोगों का भला हो रहा है तो कुछ लोगों का बुरा होगा चलेगा.
पर मजे भी तो आते हैं यार जब 4 लोग सबसे ज्यादा पैसा कमाते हैं और बाकी लोग सफर करते हैं. गेम तो वही है ना.
That is happening because of today's crony corporatist environment where we have a big government. When you have a big state and when you have the state having a monopoly on law and force, automatically you have the capitalists being the people who have the money. They go and lobby that power structure to pass laws in their favor and to have things go their way, which is why we have all this regulation, red tape, minimum wage. It doesn't help the common people. It helps the big guys, okay, because they can afford it. They can afford the licenses. They have big legal firms to help them maneuver all this red tape and stuff. It's the small guy who can't get in, who can't make prices lower for the ordinary people. Like that's what excess government meddling and intervention comes in the way of. And this is exactly what leads to people in a society where we have like couple of people like having huge net worths and having most of the resources of the world for themselves. And then you'll end up having most of society that's living in, not as well to do as the people at the top. And that is a result of government. It is not a problem that the state can solve.
बट बहुत सारे ऐसे फ्री मार्केट कैपिटलिस्ट ये भी बोलेंगे भाई उन्होंने मेहनत करी है, they accumulated that. So what's the problem in like say Bezos and Musk being super rich?
I agree with that in some sense. It's the issue is that people believe in the state, right? So they have created a power vacuum, and then they complain about like lobbying and stuff. Lobbying is just like legal bribery, if you think about it like that. So then my issue is not, of course, like I'm saying that the way current things exist, like they are going and lobbying the government, which is wrong. But what is like more wrong than that, and what really creates the problem, like if you talk about root causes, is people's belief in the central authority. The fact that they've given the state so much power that these people can come in and then lobby it and influence things in their favor. If we had a limited government, if we had a much smaller government, if we had a constitution that was more favored for individual rights rather than being a mostly socialist constitution where people are entitled to a lot of things, people don't realize that what they're complaining about and the solutions they're clamoring for is actually what got them in the problem to begin with. Like I'll tell you, this is the issue with a lot of leftists. They see poverty and they see people being poor as an outcome of capitalism. But that's not how we see it as. The real fact of the situation is, it is fiat currency and people have zero knowledge about that in the country.
Just to stop you at the fiat currency, but like when you constantly say we see it, and do you also not realize that you're being boxed in yourself in this specific brand of anarchy, and there are obvious risks to that where you might be blind to some other arguments as well?
No, so the reason I say it like that is because I believe it's an objective truth, right? I'm not talking about all my beliefs. I'm just talking about the non-aggression principle. Okay, because I believe that every individual is born with self-ownership. Like, this is my soul or whatever you want to call it. My brain is the only thing that controls this body. Right? So I have absolute control over this, and whatever property I acquire, I should have the absolute right to make rules for that, to make decisions for that, whatever that is. So I believe that everyone wants this for themselves. It's just when it comes to other people, like they make excuses. Like, okay, like everyone wants to have control on their body and their property. I can't find someone who can say, okay, chalo, like, I don't want it. Like, as I said, voluntary slavery is fine. Like, if someone wants to give it up, but it's still their choice to give it up. No? I'm saying most people don't want to make that choice. And if they want to, it's totally fine. So that is why I believe that this is the right lens through which to look at the world. And I'm talking about it in an objective way. I don't have this kind of, you can say, arrogance or this is right for any of my other beliefs. Because it's a matter of debate and discussion and moving forward. But at least when it comes to rights, when it comes to, what we can objectively define as a wrongdoing or like something that's a right, like I define it as any action that doesn't initiate force against another sentient being or his property is your right. And like everything that does that, and there are very few things that do it, like rape, theft, assault, murder, trespass, coercion, deception. Like these are the only things I count as actual wrongdoings, which are the real transgressions of the universal law. You know, that exists in the universe, that and you can actually realize that it's a law by studying its effects. The minute people start deviating from this and they stop believing in this universal law of the non-aggression principle and they start believing in collectivism, freedom suffers. And I don't mean freedom as some vague thing.
But are there no merits to collectivism?
I really don't think so. I think that whatever merits are justified by collectivism, if you see the actual, like I'm saying, if you just don't look at the small thing that people who propose it want you to look at, and if you look at the larger kind of effect it's having, it's a net detriment, because you're not valuing each individual's right. Like the thing is, we're all born on this planet with our own purpose, with our own free will to grow and develop and evolve into the best version of ourselves. And you can only do that if I give you individual autonomy over your life choices. If I have some central figure that's constantly controlling your life and telling you and controlling you for your own good. You know, that's what I was talking about with the entire demonization of vices.
मैं government का skepticism समझता हूँ, but when you say that collectivism has no real merit, it also discredits all the countries who actually have a bedrock of collectivism. फिर वो कहाँ जाएंगे? It isn't like, I won't say कि वो सारी countries are like first world countries, but they are thriving in certain aspects.
This is why I'm talking about choice and free will, right? Because the people who are living in these countries, when I as an anarchist, I'm talking about individual rights and liberties and all that, I don't expect everyone to buy into that. I get that. So the issue is not that those people want to live in those societies. Very well, yeah, you go and live there if you feel like you want to give 30% of your taxes every year, everything you want to this group of people, and they can do whatever the fuck they want with your money. If that's your mindset, then good for you, man. Do it. Like I have no issue with that. But the problem is that just because I'm born in the state that they have declared is their territory, they force the system on me. When I've never consented to any of it. I didn't consent to the constitution. I didn't sign any social contract. It's totally imaginary, man. Like this entire, I mean, there are academics who've taken down the social contract theory as well. You can read many people who've written. I mean, you can just read the Austrian literature. There are many academics who started out with a mindset where they wanted limited government, like Ludwig von Mises. And then that evolved into people like Murray Rothbard, into the current Mises Institute that we have today in America.
Oh, the what?
The Mises Institute. Like
what is that?
They are the only outlet for, you can say, proposing anarcho-capitalist ideas that I'm talking about, like radical, what people call radical libertarianism in America.
भाई आप JNU तो नहीं जाते?
And we are totally against the left. Okay, so that's what they don't understand. That people don't understand. That the things that I'm saying can trigger both people on the right side of things and the left side of things, because we find hypocrisy everywhere. Like nationalists and right-wing people are okay with using taxpayer money for protecting culture
or building monuments and statues.
Exactly, or for having a better military or whatever. I have an issue with all of that. I mean, like, if someone is objecting to their money being used there, like, see, this is the prominent divide, right? Like, leftists don't want the tax money being used to fund whatever Modi wants them to fund.
Yeah.
On the similar hand, like, right-wing people don't want the taxpayer money going to fund JNU or whatever that is.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying, like give both people choices, man. Like, why are you forcefully stealing money from
Yohan,
people to fund your vision of society?
I'm just wondering, just India के अंदर हम लोग typically discourse करते हैं. I can, for the lack of a better word or term, I will say park में बैठ के discourse करना. I have noticed in my own anecdotal experience, disagreement करना is almost like inviting furor and disruption in your social life. कि अगर 4 अंकल या 5 अंकल बैठे हैं, भाई साहब ये सब ना इस चीज़ की वजह से, बिल्कुल ठीक कह रहे हो जी, उसको उस वेव को रिवर्स करके उल्टा बोलना, नहीं एक्चुअली मैं बताता हूँ और ये पॉइंट्स हैं. It goes against our social fabric. When you go down to sit with people, because it seems to me like you come, or you've sort of self-studied and come to a culture of critical thinking, ठीक है, challenging your own assumptions, ये सब चीज़ें करनी. It's not natural to the way we typically do discourse in India. हमारे यहाँ पे discourse जो होता है, it's sensationalist, it is based on emotional appeal, it's always acting it's always like based on कि audience को सबसे बढ़िया क्या लगेगी overwritten window के हिसाब से, you know. So ये जब तू when you talk about these things, is it hard to have this discourse with your peers, with people around you? And the second part इसका ये है कि मैं तो चल बाहर गया, I went to abroad, and then as a consequence of writing essays, I learned how to, argue logically, for the lack of a better word, and then, seek disconcerting opinions. How did you acquire this, first and second?
So, firstly, speaking, I mean, this has been the theme that in that conversation we've been having, is that it's been difficult to have these conversations. It's been difficult. Look, because I'll give you an example, not just about anarchy, libertarianism or anything, or nutrition science or biohacking or whatever, but mainly my controversial views have been about conspiracy and what I've predicted 7 years back when I was in college, when I was talking to people back then.
Where do you go to college?
KC and HR. That's where I passed out from. So even academically speaking, like I graduated in BAF, but then now I've kind of come around full circle to pursuing nutrition science. So I'm currently pursuing my master's in nutrition sciences, and I work at a healthcare startup, like I told you. So we're working to pioneer functional medicine in India. Okay, so my conversations early on, I mean, right now it's become like paradise because I have a huge track record. Okay, so I've been saying a lot of the stuff I've been saying for 7 years. I have an open history. Like I even made a 4-hour video on my channel. A lot of people have watched. And I was taking people through, okay, these are my Facebook posts from 2015 to 2022. This is the kind of stuff I've been saying, I've predicted, and everything's coming true. Like whether it's talking about world government or microchipping or...
microchipping?
Yes, hyperinflation of, all these strides towards world government that people are openly coming out. Like, I mean, just look at the kind of conversations that have happened at this year's World Economic Forum meetings.
I know you mentioned some stuff, but I wasn't able to get
I'll give you some examples. So, I mean, I don't want to divert. I'll come to this, but answering your question is that I've been saying certain things are going to happen in the world by, forces that have hijacked society from the back door, that have, like many politicians in their grips through blackmail, fear, have, they set up a power structure in a way that secret societies are at the top, like the ones we're talking about, like Skull and Bones, Bohemian Grove, all of that. And then below that, you have like this kind of secret grouping, so-called. Like you have many bodies like the Trilateral Commission. The Bilderberg Group is very famous in conspiracy circles. UN, World Economic Forum, Club of Rome. So these are like collections and groupings of influential people that are brought together. They brainwash in a certain ideology, like globalism is the way to go, collectivism is the way to go. The world's going to collapse in 10 years if we don't act on climate change. Vaccine mandates are necessary. All this stuff that justifies a collectivist, you can say, a world authority, because the vision in which they see the world is that these problems we're facing right now, a single government can't give an answer to them. It has to come from a coordinated, centralized body because these problems are global. So global problems need global solutions. So if we're talking about climate change, this entire idea that if we don't control our carbon emissions, the world's going to collapse in 5 or 10 years. Like they literally put a ticking clock in, New York that's kind of talking about and pumping fear into kids and stuff that the world is going to collapse. I mean, we can touch on climate change maybe later. But my point is that I've studied a lot of literature wherein people have described in great detail in the 1990s and 2000s exactly the kind of world that's coming on. Okay, so I've known about a lot of this stuff for a long time because when I started researching conspiracies in 2016, I was reading about all this stuff. I was studying David Icke, I was studying Alex Jones, I was studying a lot of these people who were way ahead of the time and they were ridiculed and mocked, but now they're seen as kind of, in a big way vindicated because, and you have to verify it for yourself. Like just go pick up David Icke's book from 1996.
David Icke?
Icke. Okay, he's the guy who's very notorious online for believing that the world is run by shape-shifting lizards. Okay, the reptile kind of
some stat I read like a long time ago said कि 13% American ये मानते हैं कि leaders reptiles हैं.
Exactly.
The real question is it true?
we get to that probably. But my point is that I studied a lot of these people.
Yeah.
And look, the way to see it is I never agree 100% with what anyone is saying. Okay, and that's a big problem in my community because I'm trying to preach this culture of critical thinking. I don't even want people to listen to me. I always give people primary sources. Like, look, this is where I develop my opinions from. Go and take a look at that. If you can tear it apart, fine, man, I change my opinion. But people aren't ready to engage. People aren't even ready to think for themselves. And the same issue I have with the mainstream society, like they just watch television or they watch a podcast. And they just absorb that and make it their worldview. Same thing I see in my community where people just watch a figurehead, like they watch Ike or they watch someone and whatever they're saying, they just adopt it. Because this guy must be true. So the entire culture that we're trying to create of critical thinking, it's very, very difficult even in the people in our community who say they're all about free thought and critical thinking and all, because many of them are hypocrites, right? They aren't really taking the time out and doing the work. So my point is that I figured this stuff out a long time back, and I used to talk about this kind of stuff in college, that there's going to be wide-scale automation, they're going to roll out universal basic income, microchipping, world government, world army, world central bank, world digital currency. And these are the kind of trends we're seeing right now. Like many central banks are working on CBDCs. Like I was talking back then about bank bail-ins and, we spoke about fiat currency. So that's the entire culture that's developed in the West is about sound money. That's what like free market economists and people from the Austrian school and libertarians realize the importance of sound money. Because if we don't have sound money, if we don't have a fixed money supply, the government has an easy check to really tax us without telling us it's taxation. So if the government came out tomorrow and said we're going to hike the taxes by 20%, or Nirmala came in her speech in a budget and said that we're going to do a tax hike, people are going to be pissed off.
Yeah.
But if they do it through the back door, through inflation, by silently inflating the money supply, then people don't bat an eyelid, because most people don't have basic financial understanding. And the thing is, Keynesians make it so filled with jargon and so complex that the M1 money supply, M2 money supply, this, that, people can't figure out what the fuck is going on. Like, finance is intentionally made confusing.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, there's a lot of complexity and intellectual discourse in any area, but there are certain basics as well that you can communicate to people very easily. So the way we see inflation is a rise in the money supply. And that's actually the discourse. If you study 18th century, 19th century discourse in America and the West, inflation was widely recognized as that.
Weimar Republic बर्बाद हो गया था ना.
Exactly, because of hyperinflation. You have the same thing in Venezuela. You have the same thing going on right now in Sri Lanka as well. So the way we see inflation is a rise in the money supply. But the Keynesians, the school of economic thought that believe that government is necessary and that central banks are necessary to control the boom and bust cycle and all that.
एक कोई फायदा होगा गवर्नमेंट का बिल्कुल भी नहीं है. Based on what you believe.
The thing is, from a deontological principled perspective.
I'm sorry, I do not know what deontological means.
It's basically a principled perspective.
Okay.
So coming from that, like, see, there's a difference between evaluating things from a principled perspective and a utilitarian perspective. The question you asked me is a utilitarian one. Does government have any benefits in terms of helping anyone? And I approach things from a principled perspective. So my point is that government, even the help it's overtly doing, it's first doing by stealing money from people. All the things you think that the government has done that are good, okay, have come from some section of stolen money. Even if you argue that most people in the state want to pay taxes. They agree. But I mean, it's a very difficult proposition to argue right now, because everyone's cribbing about paying taxes and, okay, my money is going here and there. I don't want to.
Yeah.
So whatever good the government is doing, okay, it might do good for a certain section of society. Like, let's say like a right wing in the country wants a taxpayer money to go to the military, and they see that going there. They might perceive that as a good thing. But what about a section of society that it's more, you can say, pacifist? It doesn't want so much expenditure going into the military, right? So their money is not being used the way they want it to. Similarly, let's say the people who believe in vaccines. Okay, they are very happy that we have a state-funded vaccine program and everyone's getting it for free. But what about people like us? Like, I believe in so many other interventions that can reduce COVID hospitalization, COVID spread. I would rather want my taxpayer money to me having it voluntarily in my hands, and I choose where I fund it.
Would you take vaccines if you were not forced to take vaccines?
No, I don't believe that my position has come as a result of, you can say, government force.
You genuinely believe that vaccines are...
It's a very scientific perspective I have that are based on a lot of peer-reviewed studies.
और जो हमारे को बचपन में vaccinations कराते हैं, I'm sure you also went through those.
I did,
you know,
because
yes,
I did.
तब तो anarchy नहीं थी मन में, तब तो मतलब यही था कि भाई वाओ.
Parents का belief system था. But yeah, so I mean, I'll tell you this. The trials that have happened for all vaccines, okay, the thing is that if you actually study vaccine trials, the basic thing we require in science is a double-blind placebo-controlled RCT. Like, that's the gold standard of scientific studies, right? Whenever you're trying to evaluate if certain thing has causation, you want a placebo group. Because then you want to see if the mind-body effect is playing in there. And you want it randomized so people's biases don't come in. The researchers don't know who's in which group. The guy doesn't know which group he's in.
Right.
So you're eliminating all of that. That's what that's why we develop these form of doing trials and studies. Because we realize that, okay, this is the form that's eliminating a lot of the uncertainty and variables. They randomize people. They take a large group so that all the variables of smoking, age, sex, all that gets equally distributed. And then you're seeing if intervention works or not. The problem with vaccine trials is that in the control group, whichever vaccine trial you studied, I've looked at dozens of them, for older vaccines as well, whether it's measles or polio or whatever, you will find that the control groups don't really have a placebo. They're always using an older vaccine. Like, it's surprising for people who first hear it, and it's
placebo group है ही नहीं.
नहीं है. If you go and study the placebos they're using are prior vaccines. Okay, and the prior vaccines were approved in the same way. So I'll give you an example right now. Let's say COVID vaccines ke liye, if you study in today's time, the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines did have saline placebo groups. Okay, but if you study AstraZeneca and Covaxin, in Covaxin's case, they use an aluminum adjuvant in the control group. Okay, and in AstraZeneca's case, they actually used the meningitis vaccine. Okay, in the control group.
तो वो मतलब so they could manipulate the results.
No, you're not going to have a true idea of safety, because if you have a prior vaccine that also has an adverse event profile, okay, which is approved in the same way, like even the meningitis vaccine was approved by using another vaccine in the control group. So it's kind of a thing that keeps going on, and
it's like job referrals. You start employing your relatives one by one, and then they employ more relatives. Yeah.
Exactly. So if we don't have a true control group, I can't really tell you about side effects, because I need an actual control where people aren't vaccinated, and then I follow those people on for a year or two or some, like, even longer time, and then I see the whole problem with COVID vaccines is they want to kill the control group. Okay, and even for the Pfizer Moderna trials, the minute the vaccine rollout started, they unblinded them. So we have no idea about the long-term risks as well. And then people from the pro-vaccine community come and say it's safe and effective, there are minimal risk, like, 1 in a million hota hai. But there are issues with that as well. Just look at the adverse event reporting system in our country as well. I've studied it in great detail. We've gone to court with
adverse event reporting
system. So we have a AEFI system in India that's set up in case someone takes a vaccine and suffers from an adverse event. Practically what I've seen is that until our group started popularizing that system and pushing people to file who face adverse events after getting a vaccine. So, I mean, people automatically hear that and say correlation is not causation, bro. And like, just because someone got a vaccine now doesn't mean that uski wajah se ho raha hai. Fine, but there are ways to come to causation. Na? Aap chalu to karo, like, you have an association over there, you go and investigate.
But Yohan, why are you going against all our Bollywood celebrities who endorse masks and vaccines? Aap kyun unke khilaf ja rahe ho?
I'm not really going against anyone, man. I'm just saying, like, if they have the right to promote that, right? If they really genuinely believe. See, the thing is, most of them don't genuinely believe that. I'll show you documents from our own health ministry where they are intentionally like paying celebrities and influencers and using them to counter vaccine hesitancy. This is our government outright coming
counter vaccine
hesitancy. Yes, and even you can find WHO. They use their own PR firm to pay influencers and celebrities around the world to counter vaccine hesitancy and to promote
marketing
vaccines.
Is awesome.
Exactly, and I don't know how many of our Indian influencers are getting paid, but when I watch people like Abhi and Niyu and Durrati, all these people, like they're so open.
Let's go.
I can't help but think that it's not truly their own opinion that they're vouching. It can be. I'm not drawing blanket statements, but there's definitely skepticism once the government openly comes and admits that okay, we are influencing radio programs and we are like influencing using people from religious communities. They come and see this stuff openly, like okay, to counter this, we have to go and broach the religious communities and make them counter that. I mean, this is the tactics that eugenicists used in America. Okay, when Margaret Sanger, she is the head of Planned Parenthood, like, way back, when they were trying to get the black community sterilized, they would go and approach the black community heads and use that to like give the impression to people, okay, no, this is safe. And in America, people kind of have an aversion to this because the government has been involved in many covert programs like the Tuskegee experiment, where they secretly experimented on people. And people later figured it out, okay, like with deception, I was given this thing or whatever. So, I mean, to talk about this thing with respect to vaccine mandates, the discussion we are having is that I do believe that in the adverse event reporting system, because people are so brainwashed constantly ever since the vaccine rollout, people have been told the vaccines are safe and effective. Dude, I've seen so many people who have taken the vaccine, this got something right after that, and they don't even make the connection. They don't even know that they have to go and report it because the system is so under-advertised. Like they literally, they don't have any conception of the idea that the vaccine could cause it.
कई सारे दोस्तों ने, they said they couldn't use the words, but they were suffering from what is akin to long COVID. Like they still said कि bro, हम लोगों ने vaccine ली थी. I'm not sure if they can attribute that to the vaccine, but they said they haven't felt the same since. And I'm not sure कि do I believe that? Do I think that their mind is playing tricks? Bro, is their self-reporting inaccurate? I don't know.
Think about this in a very scientific way. If you have to tease out causality, let's say for a COVID death, okay, how do people determine causality? They see symptoms and they see a positive PCR.
Right.
That is the criteria for which you determine a COVID
post-mortem bhi karte hain na, ki he was hit by a blunt instrument and hence he died of hemorrhage from
exactly.
That, something like that.
So that's the weak, I would say very, very loose criteria and like scientifically inaccurate to attribute a COVID death. Okay, I'll tell you why. But if you apply the same thing to vaccines, if you want to attribute cause and effect to a vaccine, then if you understand the causality assessment criteria, like let's say you get a vaccine, you face an adverse event, तूने जाके AEFI file किया, the person who vaccinated you, उसका authority है कि उसको AEFI file कराना है. मतलब तूने vaccine लिया and this is your whatever symptomatic profile, you had these issues before, blood reports, whatever, everything you'll give to them.
Sorry, what's an EFI?
Adverse event following immunization. So it's a system that's set up to capture adverse events that take place after a population is the vaccine rollout has begun, and then there's a group of people at the state level, district level, and national level that will take your case. Like let's say you suffered an adverse event, like you got Bell's palsy or something, like half your face got paralyzed after vaccination. which is something that's similar that happened to Justin Bieber. You can find, even talking about Justin Bieber since it's recent, in the scientific literature, you can find, case reports. They're not RCTs or something, but you can find case reports of people who've got the vaccine and they've had Ramsay Hunt. And I can kind of relate this because I've read papers from the past where I've read about varicella zoster virus activation after receiving.
Sorry, what? Varicella zoster?
Varicella zoster is a virus that's responsible for triggering this Ramsay Hunt syndrome that Justin Bieber has. It's one of the causes. Okay, so if you go and look at the scientific literature, you will find studies on mRNA vaccination, on viral vector vaccination like the Covishield we have, actually triggering the reactivation of that virus, meaning that virus was dormant, but when I vaccinated you with adenovirus vector or the lipid nanoparticles that are there in the mRNA vaccines, it went and triggered the reactivation of that virus, because of which then you can have adverse events from the causal factors of those viruses, right? So that's typically what I would say Justin Bieber is suffering from now. I can't say the thing is, you can't exactly say it, like until you have well-designed trials. Okay, that are done properly. Like just for example, the issue I told you with the placebo group. There are so many issues other than the trials, other than that with the trials. If you just take another example, the way they determine efficacy, they came and told us the vaccine is 90% effective, 95% effective for, most of the vaccines. Even for Covishield, there were 75% plus claims. The way they determine that is they vaccinated two groups of people. In the case of Covishield, one Covishield group, one meningitis vaccine group, and then they saw how many people developed COVID and what was the definition of COVID. It wasn't like symptomatic, hospitalization, death, nothing. The trials did not show us. Emphatically, there are papers in the British Medical Journal that have been published where researchers are talking about how the vaccine trials did not prove that the COVID vaccines don't prevent hospitalization or death. They just showed that if you take two groups of people, ek ko vaccine diya, the chances of having a PCR positive are less in that group and mild symptoms. They're less in that group compared to the group that didn't get the vaccine. Okay, so the way to let's say they took 25,000 people. Let's describe in the Covishield trial. ठीक है, और उसमें से जिस ग्रुप को वैक्सीन दिया था उसमें से just maybe let's say 30 or 40 people developed PCR positive. And the group that wasn't given the vaccine, let's say 110 people got positive PCR. So then they will compare the 30 and 110 and they make it sound like shit, it's 80%, it's 90%, but what are you comparing, man? It's such small figures and it's a relative risk. It's a relative risk comparison. It's like, I'll give you another example. Like if I come and tell you, bhai, ye gaon mein murder ek saal mein 100% बढ़ गए. Be like, fuck bro. Like that's a lot. It's a huge increase, it's doubling.
Right.
But the murders went from 2 to 4. That's a doubling, right? So that's how they play with statistics and fuck people's minds. Because if you see the absolute risk, there have been papers published on this as well. The absolute risk of contracting COVID in both groups, if you see that small number divided by 25,000 compared to that 110 divided by 25,000, you come to 1% efficacy. Okay, these are published papers. You can go and they're peer reviewed. You can go and look at that. So there have been debates about all this stuff, but none of this has come into the mainstream media. There are issues with vaccine adverse event reporting. Like I said, people don't know about the system. Right, so you can find papers that have been published way back. This is before the COVID vaccines even came, where pediatricians are saying we don't trust phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 trials because the numbers are too small. You can't determine side effects because the side effect is 1 in 1 lakh and your trial size is just 25,000. How the fuck will you figure that out? So it's only when things go to phase 4, when they launch, it's called marketing surveillance.
ऐसा भी होता ना, some of these vaccines, like the Covaxin was released early on.
Yeah, they did not finish phase 3 trials, man. Like uske bina hi launch kar diya. That's why they launched it in emergency use in clinical trial mode. If you see how they released it, that's exactly how they released it. Which is why if you go and study the early beginnings of this, a lot of doctors and medical professionals were very skeptical, especially of Covaxin, and there's a lot of quote-unquote vaccine hesitancy that time. So the government had to step in, the task force people stepped in, the same people...
They had a whole branding campaign as well. This is an indigenous vaccine.
Do you know who's controlling India's vaccine communication strategy? It's the Gates Foundation, along with UNICEF.
Yeah, you were on the Garrett
Ike.
The guy's podcast you were on. James Corbett. Yeah, you talked a bunch. As a kid, I used to love Bill Gates. I think he was fantastic. Microsoft Windows, हमने use करा है. Over the years, he's sort of went from philanthropist billionaire to out and out ये पक्का अपनी 10-15 pedophile ring चलाता होगा. That's a joke, guys. We don't know for sure.
Yeah.
But people are shitting on him left and right, and it's because of his interests, clandestine interests being revealed and exposed multiple places के अंदर. उसके मुकाबले तो Bezos और Elon बहुत ही अच्छे लगते हैं.
I'll tell you the issue with this. So first, let me start with the Indian circuit. Yeah. I was watching this podcast I think a couple of months back with Swetabh and Prakhar, and they were talking about exactly this. These conspiracy theorists are low IQ. They don't think about all the potential. I mean, they're intellectually lazy. and they project a lot of things on Gates, and I mean, they think they know everything. Like, they studied epidemiology and immunology and microbiology and all, and they think they figured everything out. And I mean, I would just like to say, for those both of them, Swetabh and Prakhar as well. Like, as I was saying earlier, I do resonate with them when it comes to a certain section of our community, because people actually think like that. They're very intellectually lazy. They find very loose connections between different things, and then they'll just go off, wild claims based on very, very loose circumstantial evidence. That's definitely a problem. But I would like to, say to both of them specifically, when you're trying to evaluate Shadyantra, the conspiracies, it's all about intentions. It's all about people conspiring in secret. And this is a very legally well-defined thing, where even the Supreme Court of our country accepts circumstantial evidence. Like, see, the thing is, conspiracies happen in secret. Right. So no conspirator is going to come and openly tell you, I'm colluding with this guy, and I'm working to create this kind of thing. I can give you an example where they have come and said that. If you read David Rockefeller's book Memoirs, in that, in one of his chapters, he openly talks about, people have accused me of being an internationalist and conspiring to create a world international economic order. And he says, if that's the charge, I stand guilty and I'm proud of it. So there are some of these people who literally come out and say, this is open conspiracy, nothing secret, we're doing everything. It's just the way of pushing it is justified. Like, okay, we need this international economic order. Otherwise, we won't be able to solve climate change. We won't be able to solve the threat of pandemics, because pandemics are a global issue. So if you have the different countries taking their own things, then, we won't be able to properly respond to it and prevent the crisis. So talking about Gates, I think that's the problem, that skeptics and people who go too much into the left side of the brain, they try to apply hard sciences, reason, logic, causality to even people's intentions. And my point is that you can't do that, because it's like, think of a police officer. The police officer is a conspiracy theorist. If he's ever trying to nab a criminal, you don't have hard evidence at first. You have circumstantial stuff. Like, maybe this guy was passing.
Intuition.
And there's stuff conjecture. You can link, like, वो criminal यहाँ पे आया, and then maybe 5 people who pass in that area. But आपको पता है कि 5 में से एक तो है, वो time पे murder हुआ है, you did the autopsy, you figured out कि ये time पे around मरा है वो, and then you find out people who pass that area, you have some suspects, and you start digging down further and seeing if there's more evidence that confirms that, and finally you nab a criminal once you have a good amount of evidence building on it. It's the same thing for conspiracies, man. Like, so it's, and that's the prominent view of history. If you look at history, it's always been powerful people colluding together to consolidate wealth, to create an empire, and to grow and become more and more powerful. Like, that's a trend in which...
But it wasn't villainized when we had kings and princes. It's villainized now when we have governments. That's the only difference.
I think that time people had a lower moral threshold. If people can accept outright monarchies, who they believe that God has kind of come and blessed them with the right to rule, if that's the intellectual level of people, then of course, like, a lot of stuff won't be outrageous. But since we've moved into this kind of world now, where we do value democracy, we do value freedom of speech, we do value human rights, that's
allegedly.
Why we spoke about that quite a bit in detail. So that's my issue with even the Indian podcast circuit, where they talk about conspiracies, is that they really...
है क्या India podcast circuit?
जो भी मतलब मैंने नाम लिए, and I've done a video on Dhruv Rathi as well. He did a video bashing conspiracies. So the issue I find is that a lot of these people, they claim that ये लोग logical fallacies use करते हैं, people like us, and then they use many of it themselves. So I've done content like that, where I've dug into these people's content and showed ke these people are applying the same logical fallacies, like ad hominem attacks or appeal to authority, whatever it is. Like, they use the same things that they deride us for, like cherry picking, all these cognitive biases that we all have. So having said that, if you study Gates, like, the reason why, and it's, the thing is, people who try to debunk conspiracies always go for the weakest low-hanging fruit. Like, oh, you believe that Bill Gates is trying to microchip you. It comes off as so crazy. Like, this guy is there, and he's there's so much coordination, so many governments are involved. How the fuck could they possibly be putting, like, nanotech or like microchips in vaccines to give it to you? So many people aren't evil. These are the kind of common explanations we hear. Agar conspiracy ho rahi hoti, to koi na koi aake speak out karta. You would have whistleblowers. But we have all of that. We have whistleblowers. We have a lot of evidence that, just take Gates, for example. Like, Gates literally funded a microchip to control fertility. Way back in the day, he funded MIT scientists to create a microchip.
ऐसा क्यों कर रहा है वो पर?
They are eugenicists. That's what I'm coming to. So, I don't think Bill Gates...
You really think he's like that?
Yes, because of his family background.
What is his family background?
So, his mother had connections with IBM. Okay, and that's how he kind of started his career as well. because of what
Malcolm Gladwell तो कहता है बड़ा अच्छा बच्चा था जो 10 घंटे कोडिंग करता था. What are you saying, bro?
No man, I can give you documentaries on Gates where his career has been made for him because the kind of connections he's had in his family.
Really?
So, yes.
I thought he was a boy genius prodigy. You're ruining my childhood hero.
And he did copy a lot of tech as well. Like there's a lot of evidence on that to kind of start Microsoft. Like it wasn't the original thing. He did steal some, not necessarily steal, but hijack some ideas that other smaller people were working on and then incorporate that.
Guys, ये Apple की lobby से just saying.
No man, nothing like that, dude. I'm just speaking on like what I've objectively studied. But so we're talking about Bill Gates's family. Like his, you can say his roots have been coming from Planned Parenthood. Okay, like if you study Bill Gates's family lineage, like they were involved in a Planned Parenthood, which is a outright eugenics operation. Like Bill Gates's dad, William Gates, was head of Planned Parenthood at one time. And
really?
Planned Parenthood started outright as a eugenics operation. If you study the founder of Planned Parenthood, Margaret Sanger, she's the open eugenicist. And she has very outrageous quotes talking about sterilizing people of color and things like that.
Planned Parenthood तो एक बहुत बड़ा मुद्दा है in leftist politics in the US.
Exactly, yeah.
And,
so
and
the abortion issues is concerned with that.
And the conservatives picket Planned Parenthood. मेरे college के बाहर, we had a Planned Parenthood. When I would walk from my house to the campus, they had those paid conservatives जो बोलते थे कि abortion is murder.
It's disgusting. Like if you just, there's some clips that have come out recently where someone just mock called them and they were like, I want to give you guys money to abort a black child, and they were like, yeah, okay, we'll take it. Yeah, वैसे मतलब like outright racist tendencies in some of them. Not projecting again on everyone, but if you see as an organization, that's where like Bill Gates's roots are. And even if you study Bill Gates's association with the Rockefeller Foundation. So we have to go a little bit, if you want to understand that drive, like, their mindset of reducing the world population, they talk about it openly. So for Bill Gates, for example, he has this famous TED talk where he says that if we want to, solve the problem of overpopulation and, climate and all that, like we have to reduce one of these 4 denominators, and one of them was people. So he was like, okay, if we do a good job here, we can,
You think that's why he's knee deep into India?
No. So my point is that a lot of people in our community misrepresent that, which is why it becomes so easy to bash people like us. So people come out and say, oh, Bill Gates is openly advocating for eugenics because over there he said that agar hum log population kam karenge, so it will like benefit this issue. But that's not what Gates meant it as. If you actually see, I mean, he is conspiring, but he's never going to come out and tell you so openly. Like, that's always a red flag. ऐसे कोई आके अगर बोलता है, if you see some fucking clickbait article, okay, oh, this guy said, like, I'm openly depopulating, you're not going to believe that. No one's stupid enough to come and say that, nor is Gates. What Gates was meaning is that if he does a good job with vaccination, he has this theory, which is espoused by a lot of other people, wherein if a family's sense of life expectancy improves, like if a family feels that if I vaccinate my child, then his chances of surviving, of combating infectious disease in childhood will grow and he will survive, then that family will have less children. Because the reason why all these poor people are trying to create 10 and 15 children is because they kind of want to reassure themselves कि चलो इनमें से कोई एक survive करेगा और फिर हमारा
But look at the fact that and I could be stupid because I don't know this territory well, but look at the fact कि हमारे पास we don't have polio. We don't have other things because of vaccines and because of...
No, man. That's something I strongly disagree with. So if you see, there's a guy called Jacob Poliel. He's an Indian pediatrician. He used to work at St. Stephen's Hospital. He was part of the NTAGI. That's a National Technical Advisory Group on Immunization. Yeah. It's a government body which takes decisions on which vaccine should be included in the Indian schedule. Yeah. So he's published a couple of papers going way back where he spoke about how the oral polio vaccine program that Amitabh Bachchan pushed. Okay, so when the doses of that increased, the level to which this other form of paralysis also went up. It was known as non-polio acute flaccid paralysis. So it's a kind of paralysis. This guy called Jacob Poliel works at the National Technical Advisory Group of Immunization. Used to. Then he kind of exited that and stuff. So this was the apex body in India that decided which vaccine should come in the Indian schedule. So he has published papers in mainstream medical journals where he's in detail going into the fact as to how when India increases dosage of oral polio vaccines that are given to children, another form of paralysis spiked up, which is twice as deadly as polio. It's known as non-polio acute flaccid paralysis. You can go and look up the paper and people might say correlation is not causation. So to kind of make that assertion stronger, he did a reverse association thing where the government brought down the level of vaccine doses of oral polio vaccine and the cases of NPFA actually correspondingly went down.
Why do you always have facts on hand? I'm so impressed, bro. You're so articulate and smart.
Thank you so much. But yeah, I mean, see, the thing is, I when I'm arguing, even when I went to court, I always
You argued yourself in court?
No, I didn't. But trust me, like a lot of the research and training of the laws and stuff, like my friend and like me have done. You know, I have this close friend of mine. So we've been working since last year. As far as the legal front is concerned, like we worked with Prashant Bhushan as well. So he's a very famous PI lawyer in India. So our group actually helped him with a lot of research behind the scenes. We worked with the Indian Bar Association in Mumbai. So that's head of that is Advocate Nilesh Oja. So he's been one of the biggest legal luminaries for us because of him we've been able to win a lot of these cases. So I and my friend and I literally spent 2 months just convincing this guy. Okay, he's a big shot guy, has huge fees, multiple lakhs just for an hour of consultation and legal stuff. So top of his game, you know, really knows his stuff. And we literally took like just 1-2 months to convince him of our issues. So that time, see, when you're talking with lawyers and stuff, they already have a lot of, you can say, reverse skepticism on you.
Right.
Because they're going to throw the most difficult questions. Like even if you're loaded with facts, because they have to go and argue in front of a judge and it's their reputation.
They literally are devil's advocates.
Yeah, so they are very professional devil's advocates, and they will test the fuck out of you. And sometimes it will be like, dude, this is clear, man. Like, what are you going on about? But they want to be 100% sure.
But it's very interesting training, no? As opposed to ghar baithe armchair academia.
So I already had a background in that because, the way I've kind of developed my thinking, as I told you, is I've always listened to the other side a lot. Because I feel that the more I listen to them, तू क्या मेरे को objection देने वाला है, मेरे को पता है तू देगा उसके पहले, and I already have my counter ready to that. And I always like being in that position because I don't want to be caught off guard or say something stupid and like someone comes and tells me like, and then I fucking figure out I haven't even resolved that topic. Right. So I don't like having loud opinions on things. It's not my area. If you ask me about something and I feel like I haven't done enough research on that, even if I feel like I've done more research than someone who's loud, I'll be humble enough to tell you, bhai.
It'd be interesting to know what you think about Rakhi Sawant Swayamvar though. I think that's like a solid place where you.
Funnily enough, Rakhi Sawant actually had this clip. I was watching it last week where she was talking about 666 and Illuminati.
What?
Yeah. I'll send you that clip, man.
So funny. Love Rakhi, by the way. Knows how to stay relevant, guys.
She was like, hey, you need to go 666 bach ke rehna, and she's she had some idea of what she's talking about. I don't know how much she knows, but she was saying कि जैसे इन लोग ने अभी हमको वैक्सीन के लिए फोर्स किया, वैक्सीन से बिना कहीं जा नहीं सकते, वैसे ये लोग माइक्रोचिप लेके आएंगे.
Shout out to freedom fighter Rakhi. You know, she's really doing God's
she's
work.
Like, you need to go off grid and you need to exit from the cities and all. So I liked her vibe in that, but I feel like she could maybe put it out in a more serious way so people just don't look at it.
But over time, she's become like celebrated. She's gone past the old fluffy मैं कुछ भी करूँगी PR के लिए, to the point people are actually starting to look at Rakhi Sawant like, you're speaking some sense.
I hope that's a good thing, at least for this issue. ऐसे नहीं कि बहुत लोग वीडियो को बहुत लोगों ने देखा, I was just sharing that since we're talking about Rakhi. But yeah, so what I was saying is, even with the lawyers and even with my own like commitment to truth, okay, like I have this thing inside me where I don't want to confirm my cognitive biases. Trust me, it's easy.
But it's so much fun.
When you believe in it and you want to get stuck in a rabbit hole and people are just confirming what you want to believe, it feels very good. You feel connected, part of a community and all that. But I've always realized that my dedication to truth is more than feeling comfortable. So there are physiological processes in the body that kick in when you're trying to challenge your belief. It's known as cognitive dissonance, right? You must have heard of that.
Yes.
So, and then there's Stockholm syndrome. There's many kind of like logical flaws that our own body brings up unconsciously, like without even us wanting it. It's like if you go and talk to a staunch religious advocate about something, and they're thrown information that is contrary to their belief, they will be like, "Nahi, what I believe is true. So, tera to matter hi nahi karta. What you can't even be right." So they don't even perceive that, because of which they're losing out on a huge body of knowledge. The way I pursue knowledge is that I should be able to absorb all different viewpoints, and my worldview should be based where if I disagree with something, I have a counter ready of why that's not true. I have a strong opinion on why that's not true. That's the way I perceive things, because it puts me in a very powerful spot when I'm sitting to people, when I'm talking. And that's the same kind of thing I try to coach my community into as well, because you see a lot of intellectual laziness.
कैसे करोगे coach conspiracy theorists को यार? Hey guys, welcome to my cohort. आज हम सीखने वाले हैं कैसे अच्छा conspiracy theorist बनते हैं.
Yeah, so just a plug, I'm doing a seminar in 2 weeks where literally the first part of the seminar is gonna teach people nothing about conspiracies, is just how to think.
Interesting.
Like how do you develop viewpoints? Yeah. Okay, and
बहुत लोग सिखा रहे हैं यार इंटरनेट पे how to think.
Yeah, and it's not just that, but I mean, it's a whole lot of things. It's like everything I've studied in the last 7 years, I'm wanting to put out because there's a lot of people who are in my community who are like, okay, just give us a rundown, man. Like, there's this small videos everywhere. And I mean, even when I do videos, I do like doing long form because the kind of depth that there is to these subjects, you can't put it in a 5-10 minute video, which kind of shoots itself in the own foot because फिर लोग
आज हम बनाने वाले हैं 7 मिनट की इन्फॉर्मेशनल वीडियो ऑन इंडियाज इन्फ्लेशन क्राइसिस जिसके अंदर होगा 10% डायलॉग और सब्सटेंस बाकी 90% बकवास. Guys, welcome to my YouTube channel.
So just because people want that, I have tried to do that. But the thing I've realized in my own journey is that because I want people to actually become activated and create real change in society, the issue I have with most YouTubers who even broach these subjects is that they portray it as infotainment. They're like, मतलब ये कुछ हो रहा है इधर, ये लोग conspire कर रहे हैं, but अपनी life they don't like really make it applicable.
Have you collaborated with other YouTubers?
I mean, the kind of subject area I'm approaching is very niche. So people in general are very skeptical about the kind of subjects that I cover. So वैसे सामने से like very few times I've got, but whatever YouTube channels I've collaborated with also are the kind of people whose belief systems I have many issues with. Like, so I don't know if you heard of Dr. Biswarup Roy Chaudhary.
I have not had the fortune.
He's a very famous guy who believes in a lot of things I don't believe in. Like, he believes that viruses don't exist, coronavirus is just like the cold. And, there are other people in our community who are pretty famous who think that 5G causes COVID and all. So, मतलब इन लोग के साथ collaborate करने में, full वो आता नहीं है. Like, I'm looking for people who are really wanting to dig and get at the truth. And what I find in my own community is a lot of people get stuck in these cul-de-sacs where they then keep regurgitating these things just because someone's saying it. So in terms of collaboration, like I have come on either a couple of people I find credible. So there's a guy on YouTube called Grijesh Vashisht. So he's a proper journalist, spent many years in mainstream media, and he has a very, very refined, like I feel like if you talk about people who have some kind of following, like uski YouTube pe 3 lakh, 5 lakh hai, it's good kind of following. The podcast I did with him also, it had like 70k views. A lot of people saw it and appreciated it, and we went deep into individual rights and liberties and all that. So I do feel that there are credible people in YouTube space as well who have collaborated. One of them is this guy. Then there's another guy, Ashutosh Pathak. So he's like I like calling him the Arnab Goswami of our movement because he's very loud and he's like all dramatic and
Guys,
stuff.
Earth flat hai, maan lo.
He's much more logical than that in that way. But yeah, I mean, so he has a good kind of rigor of getting good people on his show who actually are, know what they're talking about basically. तो ऐसे कुछ लोग हैं. But then I find it's not to bash everyone. So like, I mean, people, typical skeptics on the outside of a community will look at someone like Dr. Biswarup or look at some of these people and say they're quacks, they promote Ayurveda the whole time and they believe that. So they go over the low-hanging fruit, right? So, and then they bash everything, throw the baby out with the bathwater. So in these people also, the way I approach my research is that I'll never find anyone who agrees 100% with anything I'm saying. Right? You're never going to find. Even my biggest inspirations, man, like whether it's Alex, even though I disagree with him on many things, his support for Trump, all of that, like I do feel like he's done great work. And without him, America would be way behind like what it is today. Same thing for people like Ike or Mark Passio. There's a couple of people in our movement who mentored me, not physically being there, but their work has been so monumental that it's really changed my perception and way of thinking a lot. So I do have a lot of respect. But then at the same time, it doesn't just mean that you just buy in what they're saying and throw it out. So that's the kind of thinking that I've been through that helps me to be in a spot where I have like things ready to throw at you. Like, it's just like we're talking about the whole vaccine discussion. So the polio thing I was talking about is that the paralysis that was twice as worse than polio actually went up the more OPV doses they gave, and then they cut the doses down, the numbers went down. So that's a paper he published, and then similar way you'll find that the definition of polio was changed in India to portray that polio went away. So it's like, paralysis doesn't just happen because of the polio virus. It happens from a wide variety of things. Okay, so they pushed the oral polio vaccine campaign. They targeted some strains of the virus. Okay, maybe they did a good job at reducing that, but paralysis is happening from many different causes. So by obscuring the thing and just portraying it as we eradicated polio, you're not looking at the consequences of what happened as a result of the rollout. So I'll give you another example of vaccine trials. Maybe a trial is designed in such a way where they're just evaluating one outcome. Polio vaccines, for example. Let's say they design the trial. They're looking at efficacy, oral polio vaccine दिया लोगों को. They saw antibody titers बढ़ गए, T cells बढ़ गए, whatever they evaluate in studies, right? And then they were like, okay, it's effective. But what about effects on all-cause mortality? What about effects on other variables? Right? They don't study that. So, and the trials, they do study that. I find that, okay, even if a vaccine is effective against some stated outcome, it has other collateral damages like the DTP vaccine. Okay,
Right.
it worked against those 3 target diseases, but it landed up increasing all-cause mortality. Okay, so if you don't factor in like those kind of things, if you don't design your trials well, if you're just looking at one endpoint and ignoring other things, you can end up having the projection that okay, maybe a vaccine is effective, but what are the collateral side effects? And that's the same thing with the polio vaccine program. Another thing I find with childhood vaccines is that the threat of the disease is exaggerated out, like just like if you apply the COVID scenario to polio. Okay, when you think of polio, you get pictures like images of paralyzed kids and like
Frida Kahlo.
And eye and lung machines in America, which is the precursor of the ventilator, and things like that. So you get images like that, like, okay, polio was a big thing, everyone's suffering from it, vaccines came, solved the whole thing. But if you actually study the facts about the polio situation, like I would say 95% plus people, even more than that, for them, polio is a mild gastrointestinal virus. They get polio, they contract the virus. And it sounds crazy like when you first hear it because it's a threat bana ke rakha infectious disease ka. Ki you think anyone who's going to contract it is going to die or get paralysis. And if you actually look at the facts, I mean, it's just like COVID, bro. Like if you just extrapolate the situation on other like AIDS or HIV and all that. So I'm not a virus denialist. I have studied microbiology in great detail. Viruses do exist. They do cause issues in susceptible people. But they always have a rate, like at which they're causing issues depending on everyone's host terrains, like everyone's host factors. Okay, so for example, like COVID, if your vitamin D level is above 30, your chances of getting severe infection are drastically dropped. Your chance of going to the ICU cut by 90%. There's RCTs on that, randomized control trials on that. So there are various factors, like selenium is another factor. Selenium is a very important mineral to stop viral replication. If you have adequate levels of that, then like there are papers on selenium and Epstein-Barr virus, where people who are selenium sufficient, Epstein-Barr virus in their body could not proliferate or replicate.
What's the Epstein-Barr virus?
It's another family of viruses that cause various
Pedophilia?
issues from no man, but it's a entire like category of viruses. There are other viruses also in that family that do end up causing many mysterious symptoms and issues like chronic fatigue and various things, skin issues, gut issues, all of that. So I do believe that the science of microbiology is solid. Like SARS-CoV-2 was a genuine thing. It's a novel pathogen. This was a genuine pandemic, and susceptible people did die. But at the same time, I can argue that most of the measures that were done to combat it weren't effective.
Yeah.
Okay, like mask mandates, vaccine mandates.
I think they were just done to
lockdowns.
make us more compliant. I do believe that.
Yes, because the thing they did is they made people trained in a certain way. They shut everyone in their houses, and they made people in a very fear psychosomatic state where you're just like, okay, it's like that's how they induce Stockholm syndrome in people. Stockholm syndrome is a psychological condition where people develop warm feelings towards the captors.
Right.
The people who are like subjecting them to enslavement. Right. So a lot of people who are put in this kind of state, who are filled with fear, that's when the R complex kicks in. Like, so we have a neocortex, a mammalian brain, and the R complex. These are like primary centers in our brain. So when the R complex kicks in, it's a very fight or flight response,
Reptilian
survival.
brain bolte hain,
Yes,
right.
yes, ego, amygdala also. So when that's what they're trying to trigger when they put people in a state of fear. That's the part of the brain that kicks up. You're literally, when you are going into a state of fear, your blood flows from your neocortex, which is the logical area of your brain, into the extremities. So you literally have less ability to think. And they put the controllers of this world who study psychology very well and who understand how to use situations to manipulate people's behavior and opinions in a certain way to push the agendas they want. They use these psychological tactics on us, and that's what the entire fear psychosis of COVID was all about. They exaggerated the threat of the disease so much. I mean, like, dude, I'll show you a video of mine on the voluntary lockdown day. Remember, Modi did a Janata curfew.
Yeah, you also did protests, no, with a bunch of people against
that
lockdowns.
came much later, but I'm talking very, very early on. The first day of the voluntary lockdown, okay, when Modi came and announced that wo thali bali jab baj rahi thi na tab. So on that day, I have a video of mine at Marine Drive because I was big time into listening to Ben Greenfield and like even you. So I used to go out and take
Love Ben Greenfield.
sun every day and walk barefoot, ground myself, and read a book on the beach. It's totally off because like सब चल रहा है, like ये चूतिया क्या book पढ़ रहा है मतलब.
हाँ, नहीं ये तो हो ही जाता है. This is
I got that much, and I still am.
If you want to biohack in India, be okay with public ridicule. It's gonna happen.
yeah, I can totally vouch for that, bro. But so that was my scene. So I used to go out on the beach every day. I lived like 2 minutes away from the beach in Chowpatty in South Bombay. So I was like, मतलब मैं गया था वहाँ पे, and then सन्नाटा है, like कोई नहीं है रास्ते पे, and it's literally cops are there, like चिल्ला रहे, like घर पे जाओ, like what the fuck, this is supposed to be a voluntary curfew, you know, like it's my choice to come out, man, so why the hell are you stopping me, what legal basis?
हम लोग तो छोटी डिटेल्स में जाते नहीं हैं, because as far as I believe as well, from all the news media sources I was consuming and the paranoia and fear around my parents and everyone else, ये समझता ये mandatory है.
But मैं वही कह रहा हूँ, so it's because we are computers. Okay, so whatever sources of information we consume determines the output. Okay, so let's say the sources of information you consume are as important as the sources of food you consume. The food we take in, how we are trying to you're very conscious about your foods because you looked into biohacking, functional medicine and all that. So you understand हम लोग जो डालेंगे body में उसके effects आएंगे, right? And the same thing with mindset also, like what we are consuming. I mean, it might seem like an obvious thing to state, but when you really think about it, most people are very unconscious about what they're consuming. They just turn on the TV very passively, जो paper पढ़ लिया वहाँ से opinions ले लिए. They don't actively go out and curate sources and think कि मेरे को यहाँ से ही लेना है, इसका बकवास नहीं सुनना because this guy promotes garbage, he doesn't know how to think, and this guy seems credible, he's talking based on facts and primary source material and all, so I'm going to go listen to him. Most people don't do that. Okay, they are very, as you were saying, they're very tribal, they're very, they subscribe to camps where I have a certain leaning, I'm right leaning, so I'll watch Arnab, or I'm left leaning, so I'll watch Fade D'Souza or someone. That's how most people think. Based on their political or religious leaning, they choose to listen to who they follow. So because that's not being done, the source of information we've consumed have made all this information very alien to us. So jab the thing hit, because you probably didn't have exposure to people like me, you had an opinion and you were molded because that's the only information you're consuming, right?
मैं तो Americans को देख के ही बोल पा रहा था यार कि ये लोग सही कर रहे हैं, but I can't do the same here because like police मेरी तोड़ देगी.
वही कह रहा हूँ. So
police ने तोड़, I got beaten up by the cops for violating curfew.
Really, you did?
Yeah.
I've been slapped by cop once as well.
Yeah.
So
hey man, squad.
I've experienced that. Like, one of my friends being beaten up as well for one of our protests, which was like very the खून कॉला था तब. I was like ठीक है, बाद में देखेंगे.
Did you not get honorary membership to JNU?
That's the issue now, bro. Like most of the activism and going against the government in our country is seen from a largely leftist perspective.
Yeah.
So लोग सोचते भी नहीं है कि fine, this is like a totally different wing, like protesting against mandates or like bodily autonomy. This has been very alien to India. यहाँ पे protest किस चीज़ पे होते थे कि लोगों को मतलब like people are getting less free stuff or Muslims are under attack. I'm not knocking any of those issues. Like there's separate discussions to be had on each of them. I'm just saying this is the largely contextual cultural framework that we've had, because of which even the protests and even the leaders have been of that mindset. So like what I'm doing is trying to introduce a totally new way of looking at the world, a new perceptual state that then will then go on to create a new culture, and like people automatically will come in power who will reciprocate with the people who are changing their ideas and mindset that way. So coming back to that first situation, the reason you oppose that is because you had some inlet, na? Tu bahar gaya, you got exposed to Western culture, you listen to people who are talking about these kind of things because there's still some semblance of free speech out there. And that's when you were like कि तेरे दिमाग में वो बात गया, तेरे को सही लगी, तो like ये गलत हो रहा है, there's a better way to deal with this. But यहाँ पे लोगों को exposure ही नहीं है. Like so, the thing is, if you see the protests in Europe, like even Durrati did a video on that. That's the first time I thought like the guy has made a sensible video. That way I disagree with him on a couple of other issues. But the first time he did that, he was actually like, yeah, I support the right of these Canadian truckers to protest. Okay, वो Canada में protest हुआ था अभी.
As if they care what Durrati thinks about them, but yeah, go on.
Yeah, so he was like, they have the right to protest or whatever because they're standing up for the bodily autonomy, and then he was comparing it to the farmer situation out here in India. Okay, chalo, theek hai, these guys have the right to protest, so do these people, even if I disagree with that, and वैसे करके. So my point is कि Canada में जो like protest हुआ था वो mandates के ऊपर, it was largely based on that, and it kind of drew into the other issues that I had been warning about as well. So what I have been talking about since here is financial censorship, social credit systems, like what started in China a couple of years back. If you see where that's progress right now, in China you literally have a system, like I'll give you an example of how they're using surveillance and all these things that have come in with the coronavirus measures, the health pass and stuff. Okay, so in China they have a system where if your health pass turns red, you can't travel. You can't go anywhere. And literally there were some people in China who were protesting outside a bank because the banks froze their assets. वो लोग protest के लिए जा रहे थे, and the government targeted them, turned their health pass red, and they couldn't travel to go there.
नहीं, but health pass red होता क्या है?
So it's like a permission slip. Okay, so if let's say you have a COVID negative, टेस्ट कराया नेगेटिव आया, तो यू हैव द फ्रीडम टू ट्रैवल. और इफ ते वैक्सीन सर्टिफिकेट ले लिया, यू हैव द फ्रीडम टू ट्रैवल. इट्स जस्ट लाइक अ वैक्सीन मैंडेट आउट हियर, बट इन चाइना इट्स मच मोर इंस्टीट्यूशनलाइज्ड इनटू, बिकॉज दे यूज टेक्नोलॉजी अ लॉट टू क्रिएट अ सर्वेलेंस स्टेट आउट देयर, व्हिच इज द रियलिटी टुडे. लाइक वो ब्लैक मिरर का एपिसोड से पीपल कनेक्ट के वो चाइना में क्या हो रहा है, इट वाज देयर इन ब्लैक मिरर एंड ऑल. माय पॉइंट इज दे वांट टू इंट्रोड्यूस द सेम काइंड ऑफ थिंग इन द वेस्ट एज वेल. सो इफ यू स्टडी द यूरोपियन सिचुएशन राइट नाउ, in Italy they started a social credit system very recently, wherein they're not punishing people for bad behavior, but they started incentivizing people for good behavior.
Yeah, but don't they do that for like in general? Like aap taxes bharo, aap अच्छे citizen ho.
But it's happening in a very informal way. It's
It
not
even happens in
institutionalized,
video games. In GTA Vice City, if you like beat up a thief who's running from the cop, you get $50.
Yeah, bro, but this is literally going to a point wherein if you don't follow a government law, like let's say for example, तूने mask mandate नहीं माना, तो you don't wear a mask, and a CCTV facial recognition camera captures you. This is going to a point wherein the money can get straight cut from your bank account. In fact, this is already reality in China. Like
What?
if you go there and if you practice some behavior, they have the ability to cut your money out straight from your bank account. And this is where the entire world is moving. So my point is कि China को देखते थे लोग, they were like ये communist dictatorship है, यहाँ पे कुछ भी कर सकते हैं, तो यहाँ पे कभी आएगा नहीं. Western liberal democracy में कभी आएगा नहीं है. But the Canadian example showed people can find like people stood up for mandates and the government went after them in every way. They censored their bank accounts, they like froze their funds, उनको मतलब financially target किया बहुत, they targeted them on the roads as well, made it difficult for them to get fuel and all this stuff. बहुत censorship, financial censorship, energy censorship, not like giving them the ability to get access to things they need to travel and all that. So that's kind of what's landed up vindicating people like us, because we've been warning about financial censorship in a time many years back where this stuff was totally alien to people. That's the conversation I wanted to have with you about fiat currency as well. Because along with inflation, along with like that happening and stealing people's productivity and purchasing power, there's also a big threat when it comes to the banking and fractional reserve banking works today. Because when you put your money in a bank, it's not yours anymore, dude. Like you are an unsecured creditor in the bank's balance sheet, and they can put your money wherever they want, and in case the bank goes broke or fails, like it happened in 2008 in America, then bailouts and bail-ins are justified. So until now, the conversation's been about bailouts, but if you follow like the Bank for International Settlements, okay, it's the central bank of the central banks in the world, they've been producing white papers since a couple of years talking about bail-in legislation and how banks should be able to save themselves from depositor money in case they make some bets outside that fail in the market or in futures or in derivatives or whatever that is, right? So this is the kind of future we're moving into, wherein the money that you have is constantly subjected to inflation, which is what we're seeing today in today's context. And it's not happening as an accident. Like the entire Russia-Ukraine situation also, I don't really want to get too deep into geopolitics because that will take us, quite a lot of time to cover. But I would just like to say that the situation has been fermented and has been brought to this point. Like it just didn't kick out somewhere out of the blue.
Of course,
like if you follow US and Western meddling into Ukraine, the NATO buildup that's been happening around Russia
happening for a while. It's been incrementally increasing. But fiat money के अंदर कुछ तो merits हैं. For example, you can dismantle it as you like. But my family and I were traveling through, हम लोग लखनऊ से वापस फरीदाबाद आ रहे थे. And we were on this super highway, Western Peripheral Highway. And our car was about to run out of fuel. And we bought fuel off some truckers. They had no Paytm. We used cash. उस टाइम पे based on that life experience, I was like यार वहाँ पे थोड़ी बोलते bro Bitcoin wallet खोलो, because it's just not a conversation you can have with say a blue collar worker in India. तो मतलब as much as I understand the implications, and of course हम उस जगह पे जा रहे हैं, ground reality तो आज भी यही है कि fiat money runs the world and there are obvious merits to it.
It definitely runs the world, and the merits, they're coming out of the fact that everyone's using it. My point is
Universality है उसकी. हाँ.
वही है, like लोगों ने adopt किया है तो उसके लिए benefits मिल रहे हैं, because you can easily exchange whatever you have for whatever you got, right? So I mean for what you want. So the thing I'm trying to stress is that I'm trying to convince people to show them why people saving in fiat and why people using fiat is a detriment when it comes to liberties, when it comes to financial sovereignty, when it comes to the control and the power that states have over us. Because look, I'll tell you very honestly, bro, like for me to fight vaccine mandates out here or whatever encroachments on individual liberty have taken place in India, I would find it much better if we have a two-pronged strategy. Like, of course, we're using the legal system to do whatever we can in the current
cash as well
in the current constitutional framework, but we need to think consciously about defunding the enemy. So I see states as an enemy to human rights and to individual rights.
But आप तो सर फिर वही बात बोल रहे हो, defund the police वाली, आप भी कह रहे हो government के.
No. So the defund the police movement in America is largely coming from the left, where they want the state of lawlessness and chaos and every man for himself, terror in the streets. That's why Soros is funding a lot of, you can say, prosecutors in America who are letting violent criminals go off. You can see trends develop over there. So I'm not saying that. What I'm talking about is private police, okay, not no police. I'm talking about a market environment where you have multiple defense providers who you then choose. Like, I'll give you an example, bro. So today my taxpayer money I'm paying for it is going to fund a police force that is was at least for a good amount of time enforcing vaccine mandates. Like my taxpayer money is going to BMC and they are enforcing mandates. Like I'm literally funding that. So I want, as a libertarian, कि मेरा पैसा I don't use to fund my enemy that I didn't have to go to court and fight. Like जितना मैं कम दे सकूँ, the better that is, and the better that is for everyone who wants that. So we should be able to.
Why do you call them your enemy?
Because they are encroaching on my individual rights. Like I have a right to self-ownership and property, and a group of people comes to power in society and they tell me that like I can't access my right to travel or my right to breathe freely or my right to go and get employed or whatever that is. It's a mutual voluntary agreement, right? So see, I'm all for private property owners enforcing rules. Like in a libertarian society, let's say you are a business owner और तेरे को मतलब risk लग रहा है कि कोई आया unvaccinated और मेरे को threat है. You put a vaccine mandate in your company, that's totally fine. Okay, like that's what I'm approaching things from. But in case employer and employee both are okay and they both are fine with not getting vaccinated and me being able to work, or even for lockdowns, let's say for example, like let's say governments put lockdowns in. I don't think lockdowns are ever justified from this individual rights perspective, because if business A and the guy who wants to buy from that is okay with the risk. Okay, it's all about risk, right? तू जाके गाड़ी चला रहा है, तेरे को पता है कि चांस से एक्सीडेंट हो सकता है, तो भी चला रहा है तू. मतलब you know that there's some risk that can happen from me driving a car. Similarly, I know if I'm out, there's a risk of me contracting some of the other infectious disease. Right? But you're okay when you go out. Now you're not constantly in threat. Like it's just कि COVID का threat अभी दिखाया गया है तेरे को, तो you're like focused on that. But there's so many other infectious threats that you could get. Like if you go to some country in some tropics and all, वहाँ पे कोई rare tropical disease हो गया, कुछ भी मतलब तू accept कर रहा है ना वहाँ पे जाके. So that's my whole thing, bro. Like if people are okay with accepting the risk, then they should have the right. But for people who are not okay with doing that, the state is coming in the way of two voluntary individuals who are consenting to engaging in their activity. They haven't harmed anyone else. And in that case, if the state is stealing my money and like having a standing army enforce that bad law on me, then they are my enemy, bro. Because I'm literally like funding people who are enslaving me, who are taking my individual rights away, which is why I use such strong language for them. Like they're literally robbing my money and using it to do things that I strongly morally disagree with. It's not just about me, but the thing is, my money has gone to fund a vaccine program because of which so many people have been harmed. My money has gone to fund the vaccine advertising strategies, all the propaganda the government is putting out. Like I'm sitting, don't you see, money is energy, bro. Like you're working for some guy or some organization, you have your own business and you're getting a certain reward for that. Okay, so it's literally like government is slavery. I literally say that government is slavery because they claim that they have an ownership right to the money you're earning every year. Like this group of people. See, earlier it was...
But not everyone wants autonomous use of their money. They're not all like you. कुछ लोग चाहते हैं भाई मैं दे रहा हूँ आपको जैसे लगाना लगाओ. It's the same as like you give your money to invest.
तो मैं वही कह रहा हूँ कि people want to be governed, people want a leader. Most people are there. Which is why I'm saying, see, that's the thing that gets conflated with anarchy again. When we talk as anarchists, people are like, अबे नहीं मतलब ये होगा तो कोई hierarchy नहीं होगी और hierarchies are essential in human society. I agree with all of that, dude. Like, you know, people need leaders, people need direction. No one's an expert in every single area. You're going to outsource your opinions wherever you deem fit. Okay, so I'm not saying that these are like logical fallacies that get put against anarchy, because anarchy has nothing to do with any of that. All anarchy and the non-aggression principle preach is that violence against peaceful people is wrong. Like you can't initiate force against someone who hasn't physically initiated force against anyone else. That's all we state, and we say that there should be no ruling class. It's not about no rules. Like in an anarchist libertarian framework, you will have many rules. Like I was talking about property rights in America.
You don't believe in Brahminical oppression?
No, so even those kind of things like about reservation.
Yohan, you're no fun, bro.
About, you know, Indian issues like reservation and all. I feel like these issues aren't supposed to be dealt with by forcefully taking money from a bunch of people and then, you know, having seats for these people and all that. Of course, there's a big cultural context to these issues that we can talk about. But coming as a libertarian, I apply my principles very consistently. So I would tell those people ke boycotts and engaging in things where we are, you can say, dissuading people who have bad moral beliefs. So there's a difference between morality and libertarianism. Like, you know, people think of libertarianism as this arch theory of everything about morality, but it's not that. It's a very, very tiny aspect of morality. Okay, morality is very, very broad. It's subjective. Like, right. You know, people can have different religious beliefs, spiritual beliefs. People can be scientific materialists, whatever that is. It's a very broad spectrum. But when we talk about libertarianism, we're just talking about what is just law. Okay,
laws, like, rights, governments.
Exactly. So that's a very, very tiny branch of morality. And there is objective right and wrong over there, which we define with the axiom of the non-aggression principle, which is something that's been known about since ages. So when you're talking about people wanting a leader, that's all fine and good. Like even in our community, you see people clamor around personalities. It's like if you want to ever lead a movement or you want to direct people ideologically, it doesn't happen anonymously. Like, people are just thinking for themselves. People have this thing to gather around someone who has some kind of traction and they have a personality. People can relate with them as a person. So those similar kind of things will exist in a like anarchist libertarian society also. You will have companies, you will have organizations. I'm not preaching a communist utopia out here where everything is horizontal, everyone's equal. I totally disagree with all that garbage. I feel that these are harmful beliefs that actually promote a lot of wrongdoing in the world. The kind of world I envision is one where everyone has choice. If you want to live in a limited constitutional republic, please go and do that. Let me live in a like.
भाई मैं तो चाहता हूँ मेरे rights ले लो. मैं तो बंदी बन के रहना चाहता हूँ.
हाँ तो किसी को चाहिए कि वो. That's what I'm saying. Like what you were saying, right? If someone is okay giving 30% of the money they earn every year and give it to a group of people who they trust, who उनको delegate कर दिया कि आप लोग लो मेरे लिए, तो ठीक है. मतलब उसमें कोई issue नहीं है मेरा. Don't drag me into that framework, na? Just because I'm born in an area where you are born next to, how do you like pull me into your fucking state? I never consented to any of this. In order for me to give up my property or to be subjected to these people's rules, I need to have a consensual agreement. Otherwise, all I owe anyone is non-aggression. Like, keep your mitts to yourself. Don't initiate force against any other person or their property. That's it, bro. That's the golden rule. That's all I owe to anyone. A state comes in and they tell me, you can't do this, you can't do that. We made these laws. Like, why the fuck am I subjected to your laws? Like, I have to follow them because there are like consequences.
Because you live in the geographical boundary of the state.
Yeah, because I'll have violence subjected to me. But I'm talking about what is right in the situation. And if you talk about what is right, like it's wrong for an order follower of the state to come and fine me for not wearing a helmet. Like, who the fuck am I harming, man? Like I was explaining to you, it's not about the helmet. It's about the slippery slope. Today, if I give the government the power to come and fine me for not wearing a fucking helmet, and they use the same argument in court to fucking push vaccines, bro. So it's a very, you have to look at it in a principled way. Even in the current legal framework, precedent does matter. If you give the government power in a certain area where they can encroach on your individual rights, they will take it all the way and maximize their power. They will use emergencies, they will use the threat of public, health emergencies, climate emergencies, as well as whatever concessions we give to them for individual rights to clamp down. And I have seen that like very up close and personally with respect to the entire vaccine situation.
Fucking fantastic, Yohan, bro. I'm एक तो वो Qualia hit कर रहा है ना मेरे को.
Did it work?
It's great.
Yeah,
it's great.
I feel it as well.
It's great because it really helped me hone into what you're saying. Usually I'm a little jumpy, and sometimes I have a bad tendency of speaking over people, which sort of, it's like my listening is hyperactive right now, which is wonderful.
Great.
It's also a consequence of you being a fantastic speaker.
Thank you so much.
Obviously, I think Indian YouTube should get over their informational BS. I think it's BS. And collaborate with you because you have a lot of substance to add. अब वो हिंदी में भी बात करता है. हम लोग ने हिंदी में ज़्यादा बात करी नहीं इस बार. So that, it's not like कि vernacular YouTube से collaborate नहीं कर सकते. You should do that.
नहीं, मेरा जो भी कंटेंट रहता है मोस्टली हिंदी में ही रहता है because I do want people to.
बस क्योंकि हम अच्छी जगह पे बैठे हैं इसलिए हम इंग्लिश में बात कर रहे हैं. Anyway, so people can find you where? Where can people find you?
Anarchy For Freedom India. That's my YouTube channel. I'm on Twitter at Yohan Tengra. That's my Twitter handle. You can find me on Telegram. I have AFF India. That's my handle on Telegram. That's my channel where I would recommend people want to subscribe, they go to Telegram because that's the best place, at least when it comes from a censorship perspective. Because my YouTube channel also, I've had 2 strikes 3 times. So I've almost been about to go and then I kind of save myself and have to cut down and speak.
Damn. Are you shadow banned on Instagram, by the way?
It happens in phases. So
yes.
I'll tell you what I do. So whenever you post a picture of yourself or you take something from a camera, views bump hote hain. Like, so on my stories, if I ever want people to listen to something I'm saying, I'll always record like a small video of myself where I'm talking about something. So that gets like maximize ho rata story reach, whatever. Like,
I will say first time I saw your stories, I mean, if I didn't see your videos, it seemed like you were just sitting in a room scared about the world and just sharing, dosto ye bhi bura ho raha hai, ye bhi bura ho raha hai. But like, you're such a calm, relaxed guy. So it's super cool to have functional skeptics, guys. They exist. Sahi hai. And is there anything else that you would like to say to our audiences in general?
So for the topics we touched on, of course we are like jumping from topic to topic, so we didn't really have the time to hone in. I mean, we did do our best to, and I did do my best to like give you as much clarity as I could on any given subject area. But what I would say is that I have kind of opened the door for people and showed my vision and way of thinking in many different fields. But these are like a long time of study that has taken me to come to conclusions in every single area and develop my viewpoint and stuff. So I would encourage people to just like start taking a look at the sources of information, whether it's about anarchy. So for that, you could go and check out the Mises Institute on YouTube and follow people who propose anarcho-capitalism or libertarianism. When it comes to conspiracies, I would encourage people go and research the New World Order, Great Reset, and look into what people like Klaus Schwab at the World Economic Forum and all these globalists are trying to create, which is a technocratic world government where there's no individual liberty. We're living in a world super state, end of capitalism, end of free markets, total technocracy, dude. Like a few people on the planet having a resource grab and controlling and rationing things to everyone. And literally, you don't follow what the government says, and they cut off your money supply. They give you a score. We spoke about social credit in China and stuff. So I would really encourage people to look into that, because these people have been plotting this stuff for a very long time. Like I told you, there's been books in the 20th century. Like I'll cite some authors as well if people want to go read up. George Orwell, 1984, Aldous Huxley, Brave New World. There's H.G. Wells, who wrote a book on the Open Conspiracy. He was a very famous British kind of intellectual that time.
The Invisible Man is the most popular one, right?
Yeah, there's Bertrand Russell as well, Impact of Science on Society. So there are many people like that who've written part of the globalist structure. So when I say globalist or when I say they, I mean it's a network of families and internationalists who don't have an allegiance to a certain government or a certain ideology. A lot of them are steeped into pedophilia and Satanism. We did touch a little bit on that as well.
I just cannot believe tu casually is baat bolta yaar. I'm so sorry. It's just so funny to me.
I know, man. But the thing is, it does require the depth that we did kind of try to touch on in the podcast as well. But there's loads and loads of information and stuff to study. Like at my house as well, I had been researching this stuff for so long, and I knew that digital censorship is coming. So I literally built like a library for myself where I have over 1,000 books at home physically, curated them for like 3-4 years. Just the kind of stuff that, and from all perspectives, not just like my perspective, but even skeptics and, I have books from Dawkins and people like that who would share a like contrary opinion to mine.
Very likely बहुत सारे ban हो जाएंगे future के अंदर. लोगों को
I'll give you an example, bro. So I have a couple of books at home that I now go and try to find on Amazon, and they're banned. Like they're censored.
I mean, you can find EPUBs though, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. So I was always very paranoid because I was reading about the kind of Orwellian society growing. Like even if you read Orwell in 1984, he was talking about the Ministry of Truth and how there would be this, like committee in the future that would police information and censor information and all. We saw that with the rise of Hitler as well. Whenever tyrannies are coming to power, they always want to attack free speech, because when people can't express themselves or they don't have access to opinions, then they can just like push their propaganda, and it's much easier to govern people once you control their minds. This whole thing comes down to
उनका तो propaganda minister भी था ना Goebbels. It's like when you can introduce propaganda into a state machinery like that.
Yeah, so my point is I've done deep dives into the Indian kind of billionaire class, into the Indian politicians, how they connect into the structure that I'm talking about. It's not conjecture. Like I've done a lot of original research to look into India's medical health system. Like I've done a very, very detailed article on India's COVID-19 task force and their conflicts of interest with pharmaceutical companies, vaccine manufacturers, things like that. So I would encourage people to look at this whole tapestry. So when I talk about anarchy, it's the solution. When I talk about conspiracies, it's understanding the problem, because it's like I truly believe that only from a deep understanding of what's going on can we really figure out how to get out of that. It's very, very critical and fundamental, and people think of it as being too negative or whatever, but it's just coming to terms with what's really going on in society. Only once you understand that can you even talk about like going closer towards freedom.
Right.
So I mean, the way I've presented myself on this podcast also, although I am an anarchist and I believe that we should eventually go towards a stateless society, doesn't mean we're going to go there next week or next month or next year or whatever. It's a process. Like, you have to slowly get closer to individual rights, which is everything we're doing. So even though I'm an anarchist, I do believe that we should use the political process for good. So we have people in our movement working on that. And the legal side of things, like some people ask me, bro, tu government ki courts mein manta nahi hai, to our constitution mein manta nahi hai, to tu gaya kyun? But that's what everyone believes in, dude. So you have to kind of, understand it's not just about your beliefs, it's what the culture largely believes around you. So I'm trying to influence the culture as well as use their own system to, whatever individual liberty I can preserve within that.
अगर दुनिया के अंदर 2040 तक ये आइडिया आ गया ना, I would love to just go and like infiltrate your property and then have a shootout with you. बहुत मजा आएंगे. Just like I told you so.
Yeah, but I really respect you for giving this opportunity to come on, because like I've explored a lot of YouTubers and what they're on, and I feel like people are very resistant to these ideas and they have very knee-jerk reaction. Like जब लोग ये बारे में सोचते हैं तो उनको लगता है कि ये अमेरिका में पागल, ये लोग एंटी वैक्सर्स है और साले कुछ काम धंधा नहीं है इनको, पूरा दिन ये सब चीज़ के बारे में सोचते रहते हैं. So people in India usually have that kind of mindset. Like we're bringing the worst of American culture into India,
right?
You know, but it's really the opposite. The people who've bought into a lot of liberal ideologies and you know leftist ideologies, I see that they are the problem because they are fundamentally against individual rights. They believe in violating and crushing the individual for their vague notions of greater good. I mean, just look at history, dude. From Hitler to Stalin to Mao, everyone has used this same thing. Like no one came to power saying I want to kill Jews, I want to fucking create a social revolution and kill 20 million people in China. You know, they came to power saying that we're doing this for the greater good, we're doing this for the community, and individual rights have to be sacrificed. That's been the talking point of all collectivists throughout history. And it's like, when the fuck do you stop falling for that? You know, tyrant after tyrant comes and gives you the same shit in a different context. And people
I think we like the tyrants who say they're tyrants though. जैसे Trump ने करा, देखो मैं तो झूठा हूँ. अरे वाह यार, तूने एटलीस्ट बता दिया तो झूठा है.
That's the frankness that people liked in Trump, that he's not a career politician and he was raw and he was upfront and all. But I have a problem with the thing with me is I draw flags from everywhere because it's like in my own community I get so much shit because I openly sit and call these people out who promote these whack ideas, and like I do call them whack and I don't care about burning bridges or whatever, but it just reduces the credibility, man. Like if you want to go and at least have a conversation with someone who's an expert in the area or whatever, you should know what the fuck you're talking about. You know, you shouldn't like go off and run on loose theories that there are people talking in detail about like why they're not true, why viruses exist, why 5G is not the cause of COVID. So I kind of see an issue with many different, you can say, forms of belief and stuff. And that's exactly what I'm trying to working to pioneer with my channel, is really giving people a way to think critically at various kinds of belief systems and come to their own opinions. And I only think that can happen when everyone starts a journey of truth. It's not something you can like shove down someone's throat, but you can teach people like this is how to proceed, and you know, if they follow that, then they will reach huge mental breakthroughs, which I have as well.
Well, I hope we've planted several seeds, and bro, thank you for coming here. Thank you for being so articulate. बहुत मजा आया मेरे को.
I really love this conversation, man.
Yeah, thank you so much. And people can follow you on the various things you plan. Obviously, अब हम इस broadcast को बंद करेंगे because अपने zips उतार के हम लोग अपने actual reptilian hide में आने वाले हैं. तो वो करना ज़रूरी है और I think वो कैमरे पे दिखाना नहीं चाहिए, ठीक है ना? I haven't seen you in your reptilian hide in a while. I know you're like.
I told you I'm a Freemason, right? So like, I'm collaborating with these people.
I definitely think you're like a more. Last time I saw you several years ago, जब हम dinosaur age में था, I saw you as a Bengali monitor. I would love to see what has changed because I'm a total Komodo, by the way. ठीक है, चलो. Okay, guys. See you in the next episode. Don't forget to subscribe. Bye bye.